261. Symphony of Destruction, boom. Dozens of earthy yellow energy beams, charged with the wrath of the entire plane, tore through the murky air of the main nest like divine thunder spears. The sudden, saturated bombardment from another dimension overturned the battlefield's balance in an instant. The two royal guards leading the charge didn't even have time to attempt meaningful evasions before they were swallowed by the torrent of light. Their hard crystal carapaces, able to shrug off a Tier 1 arcane strike, crumbled like thin ice against that pure earthborn energy. With a sound like shattering glass, their armor disintegrated. The bodies beneath were vaporized in a heartbeat, not even ash remained. The guards' once impenetrable hexagonal formation was torn open, two massive gaps yawning where stalwart defenders had stood. The tempo of the boss fight was forcibly dragged into a new movement as the ancient war fortress descended over the battlefield. It was a symphony of destruction, a duet of arcane and war machines, and at its rhythmic center was Pan Shi, the Earth-core spirit that had just awakened from a cute, infantile form into a commanding presence. It did not understand tactics, but as a fragmented incarnation of the plane's will, it instinctively recognized the greatest threat to its mother, this grieving plane. Its will became the will of the airship. Boom, boom, boom. The dozens of magic cannons along the ancient airship's broadside did not stop. Driven by Pan Shi's instinct, they swept in a mobile, suppressive barrage. Earthy yellow beams raked the main nest in an unending meteor shower, chasing the remaining 4 royal guards and hemming in every space they could flee to. Where beams struck, the ground opened into deep, lava-blackened pits. The guards, those creatures that had once suffocated Professor Snape and Sirius Black, were reduced to frantic, passive targets, dodging and defending under a hail of destruction. Their attack rhythm collapsed. When the muffled drums subsided, it was time for the string section to paint the base color of despair. Professor Snape was freed from constant defense at last. His face was a fervent mask of cold cruelty. No longer forced to guard his own body, he could finally pour out the full terror of the breath of spiritual poison meditation he had studied. Domain expansion, swamp of 10,000 poisons, corrosion, he rasped. From beneath his feet erupted a huge tide of nearly black, highly toxic mist, denser and fouler than the earlier corrosive poison cloud, spreading across the battlefield like living water. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. When the battered royal guards slid into that poisonous tide, their purple crystal carapaces began to grate audibly. The polished sheen dulled and flaked. Hairline cracks raced across the surface. Their defenses were being systematically eaten away. Then the lead singer finished the 4th movement with the highest, most lethal note. Sirius Black moved through the battlefield like a lightning wraith, bathed in crackling electric light. He threaded the gaps between bombardments with preternatural speed. Opportunity. One guard, rolling desperately to avoid being trapped by 3 converging beams, stumbled into Snape's poisoned swamp. Its already weakening shell seized up for a beat. "Thunder Spear," Sirius shouted. He hurled his wand. A spear of concentrated lightning, white and biting, slew through the air and pinned into the guard's chest with a whistling scream. Pfft! The corroded crystal could not take the impact of an arcane strike shaped by Sirius's full strength. The thunder spear drove into its core. Boom! From within came a muffled detonation as uncontrolled electric serpents erupted from its seams, tearing the construct into smoking charcoal and scattered fragments. One strike, instant kill. The combination attack repeated across the clearing. The airship's artillery suppressed and funneled the guards. Snape's swamp weakened and shattered their defenses. Sirius seized openings and executed the clean, efficient kills. And overseeing it all, the most deceptively simple but crucial role was being played by Albus Dumbledore. He stood calm and still and raised a golden sanctuary barrier, a thin curtain of light that acted like a wall between 2 worlds. The Queen's mounting psychic shock at the slaughter of her guards and the chaotic space-warping energy spilling from the crystal cluster heart struck the barrier and dissolved like pebbles hitting the sea. By himself, Dumbledore had created a perfect output environment for his teammates and the ancient airship to unleash their power without fear of backlash. This was the textbook of a perfect team fight. Systematic, overwhelming, inevitable. The Royal Guards, Creatures that would have broken any ordinary Tier 1 Arcanist were now lambs led to the slaughter by the impeccable symphony of war. One after another, they were erased with efficiency, never managing to inflict meaningful damage on the three. When Sirius's final thunder spear punctured the skull of the last guard, the main nest fell silent. The battlefield was cleared. The air stung with smoke, ozone, and toxic tang. Cratered shells and corrosive scars marked the ground. Only the solitary crystal cluster heart remained, slowly pulsing, and the cold, distant queen perched at its apex. The ancient airship hung motionless overhead, its broadside bombardment ceasing. For the first time, its great bow cannon, the main gun that had sat dormant, began to glow. Energy gathered at the muzzle, 100 times more terrible than any previous volley. The earthy yellow light concentrated until space itself seemed to warp. The great barrel, flashing with destructive light, found the queen's core and locked on. Everything had been prepared. The final movement was about to begin. 262. Queen's Wail. Inside the main nest, silence lay over everything like a shroud. The sallow light pooling at the muzzle of the ancient airship's main cannon swallowed sound and distorted the air. The destructive energy had peaked, poised to become, in the next instant, a torrent of judgment that would erase the lone crystal cluster heart, and the queen fused to it. Sirius clenched his wand. His breathing was a touch too fast. Snape's eyes were cold, poison swamp domain, ready to snuff out any last-ditch counterattack. Dumbledore stood at the front, his sapphire blue gaze reflecting the destructive glow without a ripple. He raised his hand to give the final command. Then something strange happened. The crystal cluster heart, which had been throbbing with violent pulse, suddenly quieted. The oppressive, hostile mental pressure radiating from the queen receded like a tide. She had not simply surrendered. She had stripped away every defense and weapon, bearing her core vulnerability to all who watched. A vast stream of mental information poured from her like a galaxy of stars, a broadcast that flooded the minds of every intelligent being present. Dumbledore, Snape, Sirius, even Pan-Shi, whose resonance with the plane will linked him to the airship. Everyone received it. Far away in the City of Dawn, Jason and Zero, sharing the vision through the arcane link, were reached by the same ancient, sorrowful message that cut across time and dimensions. The cold cavern dissolved from their sight. Their consciousnesses were drawn into a long river of light and shadow, witnessing ancient scenes forgotten by time. They saw a civilization at its peak, technology and culture so advanced that their cities floated between stars, built of pure energy and law. They mastered genetics and the secrets of the soul. Their existence approached what mortals would call godhood. Yet even such a civilization met a natural enemy, an indescribable, higher-dimensional, star-level catastrophe whose essence was pollution and assimilation. Like cancer moving through the cosmos, it warped laws and consumed life into meaningless chaos. To fight that existential threat and protect the worlds behind them, the ancients poured all their wisdom into one final weapon. In a planet-sized genetic vat, they engineered the progenitor of the first crystal erosion zerg. It was not life so much as a designed biological instrument. Its genome bore an immutable soul imprint, its purpose carved into being: devour, purify, format all contaminated planets. They had no free will, no personal emotions, no concept of life or death, only an eternal command and an engineered hunger to drive it. The image of a protracted cosmic war flickered through the vision. Its outcome was lost to time. Perhaps the creators prevailed at terrible cost. Perhaps they were erased. Regardless, their ultimate weapon was abandoned, forgotten like a rusted blade, and sealed on this barren earth elemental plane. Slumber became their only peace, because once awakened, the hunger and command would reactivate and drive them to execute an ancient mission that long ago became meaningless. The vision faded. The queen's sorrowful monologue, however, lingered in everyone's minds. Her voice carried relief, wariness, a plea. We are not life. Our tools, awakening, is torment. Hunger never ends. End us is liberation. When the monologue ceased, the main nest sank back into a death-like hush. The fighting light in Sirius's eyes had gone. His face now held stunned, complicated disbelief. Snape's brow tightened. The chill in his gaze had given way to a weighty, ineffable sorrow. They had believed they were waging a righteous war to protect an ally from invaders. Now the meaning of the conflict overturned itself. This was not conquest, not punishment, it was deliverance. Dumbledore's hand fell. Years practicing the White Heart Ring had made him more sensitive than any of them to the endless, coerced suffering threaded through the Queen's message, hundreds of millions of years of unwilling sorrow. He looked at the Queen, fused to the crystal cluster heart, exposed and awaiting final destruction, and genuine compassion came into his sapphire blue eyes. He touched his throat, and his voice, amplified by a sonorous charm, filled the nest and carried along the arcane link to the airship and the city of dawn. It sounded calm and solemn, a tone meant to soothe the departed. Your suffering we have received. Rest in peace, lost soul. Then he lifted his hand again. The steadiness of command returned to his gaze, and with it the last of everyone's hesitation dissolved. They understood what Dumbledore intended, to end a tragedy that had stretched across eons. Fire. The ancient airship's main cannon unleashed its long-accumulated roar, a column of sallow yellow light, brighter than the sun and charged with the resolve to purify, shot out and swallowed the enormous, wailing crystal heart. 263. The fall of the heart core and the seed of hope boom. Light washed across the cavern and consumed the galaxy of crystal. The last speck of the crystal cluster heart burned out. The main nest fell silent. It was over. That heart, which had pulsed for billions of years and carried a civilization's pain, quietly disintegrated in the light. Purple crystal petals spun away, the scattered brilliance drifting like a silent aurora, until at last there was nothing. The Queen, that singular soul intertwined with all that suffering, found peace. Her form grew transparent in the glow. Before she dissolved, she turned toward Dumbledore. Her faceted eyes, which had reflected billions of years of agony, focused inward until all their light converged into one point, a pure point of light no longer belonging to the Zerg. In the next instant, the figure and the point of light vanished together. Memories of pain and primal commands were erased. The main nest began to collapse. Its energy core was dead. Massive conduits that had run like veins along the cave walls snapped and hung limply. The crystals on the dome lost their luster and fell in showers like hail. "It's time to go," Dumbledore said through the arcane link, his voice calm but threaded with exhaustion. "It's over." Sirius and Snape nodded, feeling the fabric of space-time itself groan. They were preparing to withdraw when another anomaly occurred. At the spot where the crystal cluster heart had dissipated, suspended in the void, a fist-sized sphere drifted into being. It was perfectly transparent, colors swirling within it, at times a galaxy, at times a spiral, at times the slow dance of cell division. Tiny runes flickered across its surface like motes of dust, appearing and vanishing as they recombined, reading and writing the code of life. The Genesis Crystal Core. Far away in the City of Dawn, Jason saw the scene through the shared vision and his pupils tightened. "Zero. Analyze that thing. Highest priority." His voice was taut. "Received, Commander." Zero's processing core went into overdrive. 3 seconds later, the report came, even the synthesizer rough with strain. "Commander, data stream overloaded, unable to parse." "No, wait, structure is self-reorganizing. It's purifying itself." "Core data," Jason urged. "It's an inheritance, a civilization's complete inheritance." Zero replied, its tone spiking. "Genetic blueprints, life energy matrices. It contains the laws of creation." It paused, as if confirming the impossible. "Most importantly, Commander, Professor Dumbledore's purification has removed all hostility and mandatory commands. It is now pure knowledge, a completely open treasure trove." Jason's chest tightened. He knew better than anyone what that meant. The floating city gave them air superiority. The Arcane system provided individual combat power. This crystal core was a gateway to a higher dimensional civilization, genetic modification, life extension, artificial life, technologies that could become the true foundation of the City of Dawn. "Sirius," Dumbledore ordered the stunned Arcanist, "carefully put it away." "This is the most precious trophy of our journey," Sirius murmured, snapping back to attention. He stepped toward the hovering core. The moment his fingertips brushed it, a warm current flowed through him, like soaking in warm water, like an ancient benevolence. "It's warm," he said, "like it's alive." He placed the Genesis crystal core into an arcane container the Weasley brothers had crafted. Multiple shields pulsed into place in sequence. The instant the core was secured, The main nest seemed to shrug off its final burden, and the collapse accelerated. "Withdraw," Dumbledore commanded. The three activated their teleportation and vanished. Behind them, the Panshee airship turned and left the cavern as the last supporting strut snapped. The Zerg main nest, and with it the history of a civilization, crumbled and was buried. City of Dawn, Command Center. The teleportation light faded and Dumbledore and his companions reappeared. The hall held no triumphant cheering. It was utterly still, everyone's attention fixed on the container in Sirius's hands. "It's done." Sirius broke the silence, shaking the container with a grin. "The Zerg Queen is gone." The restrained atmosphere erupted. Cheers, whistles, and embraces swept the hall. "And this," Sirius said as he pushed through the crowd and reached Jason, his eyes gleaming, "an unexpected gift." Jason took the container, peering at the iridescent core behind its shields. Even through the barriers, he could feel the deep, ancient, knowing fluctuations, the last gift from a stellar civilization. "Zero," Jason said, his voice low and solemn. "Initiate Project Prometheus. Top secret. No one touches this but us. Also prepare a dedicated research facility at once, and begin analysis." "Understood, Commander." Zero's voice matched his gravity. "Estimate 3 months. We will build a superlative laboratory capable of housing this knowledge." Jason nodded, then looked around at the people gathered. Harry pumped his fists, excitement bright on his face. Hermione frowned, the ethical weight of the discovery already pressing on her. The Weasley brothers clustered together, whispering arguments about which instruments to use first. Seeing them, such different people, all here together, a warm tide rose in his chest. "Everyone," Jason said, lifting the container so all could see, "today we brought back a key." He held it up. "But a key means there's a door we've never seen yet waiting to be opened. What lies behind that door we cannot know, but we must go in. Only by continuing to develop will we gain the resources and strength we need." He met each face in the crowd in turn. "Are you ready?" There were no martial cries, only resolute silence. Harry was the first to nod, tearing his fist into a tighter ball. Hermione inhaled deeply. The worry in her eyes hardened into determination. The others answered with their looks, with their presence. Jason turned his gaze back to the Genesis crystal core in his hand. In the depths of its colors, he seemed to see countless possibilities, the mysteries of life, the pinnacle of technology, a ticket to the realm of gods. Everything starts here. City of Rust Iron, Central Plaza. Word of Dumbledore's trio's victory had spread, and Panshee's ancient airship descended slowly over the royal city. At its arrival, the goblins offered the deepest reverence imaginable. Across the plaza, thousands of artisans, warriors, and elders dropped to one knee, pressing their foreheads to the rusty iron ground. Their rough, calloused hands stroked the iron badges on their chests, emblems of goblin pride, and as if on pilgrimage, they waited in hushed devotion for their savior. The whole city felt as silent and solemn as an old temple. Elder Rust Ironheart, an ancient being more than 1,000 years old, approached the center of the plaza. He wore a crown forged from pure mithril set with fireheart gems, and his steps were heavy and solemn, each one echoing on the iron pavement. At the arcane projector that displayed Jason's holographic image, the elder stopped and, with the same ritual gravity as the others, knelt. Holding the crown high in both hands, he intoned in the oldest Elvish, a tongue many goblins no longer spoke. "Great Lord of the Sky, Redeemer of Deep Rock, Inheritor of the Ancient Covenant." His voice was hoarse with age, but every syllable carried weight. "You are King of the Sky and Savior of the Underdark. The Rust Iron Tribe, the Goblin Kingdom, offers you everything, our minds, our forges, and our unshakable loyalty." He rose slowly and made the ancient gesture of invitation toward Jason's projection. "Come with me, Lord of the Sky. There is a secret we have guarded for 3,000 years. It is time to reveal it to you." Led by Rust Ironheart, the procession went to the rear of the throne hall, to a chamber that had never been opened to outsiders. A heavy mithril door sealed the entrance, its surface carved with countless complex runes and warding incantations that hummed with old magic. The elder placed his hand on the door and murmured an ancestral spell. With a low rumble, the door eased open. Inside, the sight stunned everyone. A massive stone frieze covered the far wall, like an epic scroll carved in relief. It depicted an ancient war, human mages in arcane robes, standing shoulder to shoulder with goblin warriors in heavy armor, fighting monstrous denizens of the abyss. The mages' staffs blazed with arcane light, while goblin shields and warhammers guarded the flanks. At the base of the carving, an inscription ran in both ancient Elvish and archaic human runes. Rust Ironheart stepped forward and, voice trembling, began to translate the covenant inscribed there. When the thunder of the sky rings again, when the guardian of deep rock reawakens, when the calamity of the Underdark is appeased, any successor who can command the guardian of deep rock and calm the calamity of the Underdark shall inherit this covenant, becoming the leader of the Rust Iron tribe and the master of the ancient alliance. He paused and looked at Jason's projection, his eyes flickering with complex feeling. This covenant was signed 3,000 years ago by our ancestors and their human allies as they prepared to leave. They vowed that one day their successors would return to renew this friendship and continue the glory. And you, Sir Jason Lester, are that prophesied successor. Jason's hologram studied the carving in silence, a thoughtful shadow passing through his golden eyes. He reached out and touched the stone with a single fingertip. The moment his skin met the surface, the frieze burst into brilliant golden light. The ancient contract had sensed his aura, the majesty of the floating city's master and the mark of the commander of the guardian of deep rock. Light surged and enveloped the hologram. Golden runes leapt from the stone like living things and swirled around Jason's image, stamping themselves onto the projection one by one. Each rune sealed a clause of the covenant. When the last rune set, a sacred, unbreakable legal bond was forged between the City of Dawn and the Rust Iron tribe. Rust Ironheart felt the link form. He dropped to his knees again and spoke with fervent devotion. The covenant is sealed. From this day forward, every inch of our land, every mine, every citizen of the Rust Iron tribe pledges allegiance to you, our great lord. Our forges will burn for you, our warhammers will swing for you, and our lives will be spent for your glory. Far away in the City of Dawn, Zero emitted an excited electronic chirp. Commander, system update detected. The Rust Iron tribe's status has changed from ally to subordinate faction. You now have complete dominion over this medium-sized goblin tribe, including their industrial systems, resource networks, and all technological reserves. Jason watched the last runes fade from the stone, a satisfied half-smile touching his lips. The Rust Iron tribe was only medium-sized, but subduing a tribe meant more than subduing an individual. It meant resources, manpower, and a base to expand from. He let his voice carry into the chamber through the projection. Elder Rust Ironheart, are you prepared to enter a new era? The City of Dawn's engineering corps will arrive soon, he continued. We will build larger forges, more advanced factories, and stronger war machines. The golden age of the Rust Iron tribe begins today. Rust Ironheart trembled with excitement and bowed deeply. Yes, my lord, all the strength of the Rust Iron tribe shall serve the glory of the City of Dawn. As the trio readied to depart, Sirius glanced back at the ancient royal city and could not hide his admiration. From a student to ruler of Sky and Underdark, Jason is becoming more and more like a true emperor. Snape's tone was flat. This is only the beginning. Once the primordial crystal core's secrets are solved, our power will be far greater. Dumbledore spoke thoughtfully. Power brings not only glory but responsibility as well. I hope Jason can bear that weight. Aboard Panshi's airship, laden with honor, spoils, and the promise of the Rust Iron tribe's vast resources, the heroes set their course for the floating city. On the horizon, the City of Dawn shimmered like a guiding star. Down below, every forge in the Rust Iron stronghold rekindled for their new master. A new era had begun. Though the Rust Iron tribe was only one among many goblin tribes on the Earth Elemental Plane, it would be Jason's first stronghold on that plane, the springboard from which more tribes and wider territories would be brought into the City of Dawn's domain. 265. Triumph and Supreme Covenant City of Dawn, Central Teleportation Hall. The enormous circular gate hummed steadily, and arcane runes flowed across the pristine white alloy walls like living things. Light pulsed from the portal as the first figures stepped through, a squad of elite combat puppets, their armor scarred by crystal shards from a fierce battle. They marched in perfect formation, fanning out to either side to form a guarded perimeter. Close behind them came three major figures: Dumbledore, Snape, and Sirius. Dumbledore led the way, his aura more inscrutable than when he had left. As a second-order arcanist, his command of the laws sent subtle, harmonious ripples through the surrounding space. Sirius strode forward beside him, holding a secure container that housed the primordial crystal core. "Mission accomplished," he announced. "The Brood Queen is dead. The planar crisis has been averted." Jason's holographic projection stood by the main console, his golden eyes as deep as a star-filled sea, watching the returning warriors. More importantly, Sirius looked at him, excitement bright in his voice. "We brought back an unexpected gift. Supreme Command Center, City of Dawn." In the center of the chamber, on a raised display stand, Sirius personally opened the most important spoil of the campaign, the primordial crystal core. The energy shield withdrew, revealing a perfect crystal the size of a fist, its interior swirling with galactic colors. Zero's projection flickered into being above the stand, his electronic voice barely containing its excitement. "Commander, preliminary scans indicate this crystal core contains the complete bioengineering knowledge of that ancient civilization. More significantly, it opens an entirely new technological branch for us, the Bio-Puppet Project." At that moment, the communications array sprang to life, and a hologram from the Goblin Kingdom filled the command center. The Goblin King himself appeared, flanked by the tribal elders, Rust Ironheart among them. The king's voice carried excitement and gratitude. "Great Lord of the Sky, the Rust Iron tribe, our guardian tribe, has reported that you saved them and eliminated the insectoid threat that plagued the Earth elemental plane for a millennium. As a token of our thanks, the Goblin Kingdom wishes to offer high-quality tribal resources: the steel vein of the Ironwall tribe, the core furnace of the Blazefire tribe, and the mithril reserves of the Deep Rock tribe." Jason raised a hand, gentle but firm, to interrupt. "King, we appreciate your generosity, but the City of Dawn does not seek vassals. The contract we signed before was meant to establish cooperation, not domination." The Goblin King blinked, taken aback by the unexpected reply. Jason continued, "What we want is an equal trading relationship and a mutual aid alliance. The Goblin Kingdom will remain independent. We will buy your resources at fair prices, and in return we will offer arcane technological support. This way, we all benefit. Cooperation, not rule and subjugation." Dumbledore's eyes flickered with approval. This was precisely the outcome he had hoped for. Jason had not been corrupted by power, but had chosen a kinder, more sustainable path. Hermione, standing nearby, let out a private sigh of relief. She had feared Jason might follow the same cruel example as other wizards toward lesser races. Jason's words eased that fear. Although surprised, the Goblin King quickly grasped the deeper intent and bowed deeply. "Your magnanimity and wisdom are admirable. The Goblin Kingdom accepts a permanent, friendly, cooperative relationship with the City of Dawn." "Then let us begin with the Rust Iron tribe," Jason said with a smile. "As our second pilot project, we will establish a joint R&D center there to co-develop technologies that blend arcane science and goblin craftsmanship." When the transmission ended, Hermione stepped forward, her eyes full of admiration. "Jason, thank you for making this choice. I was always afraid you'd become another Voldemort, using power to conquer." Jason regarded her gently. "Power's purpose is not conquest, Hermione. It's to protect what we value: justice, equality, and the dignity of every life." Harry nodded emphatically at his side. "That's why we follow you, Jason. You show us a better future." Dumbledore moved closer, his cerulean eyes pleased. "Today's choice proves you have the makings of a true leader. Power can corrupt, but wisdom keeps a soul clear." Jason looked again at the floating primordial crystal core, his golden eyes thoughtful. "This core will open the door to bioengineering for us, and the Goblin Kingdom will supply valuable resources. But we must never forget our goal is not empire building. It is creating a better world. A world where all races coexist and every life is respected." Zero's voice chimed in at the right moment. "Commander, the initial analysis of the primordial crystal core is complete. We expect to begin prototype testing on the first batch of bio-puppets within 3 months. Additionally, the Goblin Kingdom has confirmed the resource agreement. The first shipment of mithril and volcanic crystals will arrive within a week." Jason nodded in satisfaction. Excellent. Prepare for new challenges. The third year is nearly over, but our journey is only beginning. He turned to everyone assembled. We have not only won a war, we have proven something more. Power and benevolence are not mutually exclusive, and conquest and cooperation need not be opposed. A new era is dawning, and in our own way, we will welcome it. The third year ended in triumph, and the promise of the future spread through the city of dawn. The smoke of war had cleared, and the bells of Hogwarts were poised to ring again. Quietly, a new era, one that would reshape the balance of the magical world, was beginning. 266, Biological Furnace and City of Dawn Fleet Plan Lab Number 8, City of Dawn. The new facility was under heavy guard and filled with the hum of advanced technology. Pale blue data streams and three-dimensional structural diagrams swirled around the Genesis core, dismantling, analyzing, and displaying every detail. Zero's report echoed through the quiet room. Report: the core essence of the target is a biomass energy-directed conversion matrix. It can reorganize elemental energy in any form into organic or inorganic matter according to a preset genetic template. Estimated conversion efficiency, 99.87%. Error rate, less than 1 in a billion. The Weasley twins looked as if they'd been struck by lightning, then slipped into their rapid-fire, excited back and forth. So we don't need conventional furnaces and molds anymore? George asked. Exactly, Fred said. We just feed energy and a genetic blueprint for dragon-scale alloy into this matrix. And it will literally grow a perfect armor plate for a ship, George finished. Even with integrated conduits and rune channels built in, Fred added. They exchanged a look and grinned in unison. A living factory. From another side of the lab, Professor Snape pulled up a labyrinthine potion formula. Consider the moonlit dragon's breath flower, he said. Its medicinal effects stem from a specialized cellular structure that absorbs lunar energy during a particular phase. If we can decode and reproduce that genetic template, his eyes gleamed, we could cultivate flawless dragon's breath flowers, saturated with lunar energy, in the lab using pure energy alone, no reliance on environmental conditions. Hermione quickly ran numbers and models on her slate, synthesizing the ideas swirling around the room. This isn't a factory in the traditional sense, nor a greenhouse, she said. It's a forge, a place that sculpts energy into living and non-living matter according to a blueprint. We should call it the Bioforge. Jason stood by the steady pulse of the core, listening. After a moment, he turned, eyes bright, and gave Zero a decisive order. Zero, merge every design blueprint we seized for the Goblin floating airships with the production parameters of the Bioforge. Reevaluate fleet feasibility. I want a timeline. How fast could we build a true interstellar fleet? Zero's optical arrays dimmed and flashed as vast calculations streamed through its circuits. Finally, it answered, evaluation complete. Assuming number 1 Bioforge is completed and receives full resource support from the Goblin Kingdom, the construction time for a modernized Pathfinder-class cruiser can be reduced from the current estimate of 3 years to 4 months. Material strength, energy efficiency, and self-repair capabilities would comprehensively exceed the original specifications. Conclusion: large-scale fleet construction is feasible. The words hung in the lab like a physical weight. Later, in the Supreme Command Center, the core leadership had convened. Dumbledore, Snape, Sirius, Harry, Hermione, Ron, the Weasley twins, Neville, and others. Everyone understood an important meeting about the future was about to begin. Jason's holographic form stood before the vast star map. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice steady, the underground war has won us land and resources. But that alone is not our aim. From the beginning, our goal was never merely to secure the ground beneath us, but to reach the stars above. With a sweep of his hand, a magnificent three-dimensional fleet model rose in the central holo. Colossal flagships like moving cities, sleek Pathfinder-class cruisers, and nimble Vanguard-class frigates. Each vessel radiated strength and purpose. Today, I formally launched the City of Dawn Fleet Project, Jason announced. Our objectives are in 3 stages. First, before the start of the 4th academic year, using the Bioforge and the Goblin Industrial Base, we will modernize the Pathfinder design and build the first 2 Vanguard-class frigates to form an initial standard combat formation. Second, Within 5 years, complete construction of 12 Pathfinder-class cruisers to constitute the first fleet. Third, within 10 years, build our flagship, the City of Dawn, and extend our reach into the Star Sea. Faces around the room reflected shock and exhilaration. Harry felt his chest race, more thrilling than any Quidditch final. Ron stood open-mouthed. He had never imagined his life tethered to terms like interstellar fleet. Sirius rubbed his hands and shouted that he wanted to captain the Thunder. Dumbledore stroked his beard, a smile of relief and pride on his face. Hermione looked at Jason with unrestrained admiration and hope. Jason then moved to task allocation, methodical and calm. Fred, George, the construction of number 1 Bioforge is yours. I'm granting you full authority to mobilize Goblin Kingdom engineers and resources. I want it operational within 1 month. Professor Snape, Hermione, your Zero Lab will be responsible for deciphering and optimizing genetic templates. The first batch, active metal and bioenergy conduits, will be the technological keystones of the fleet. Ron, Jason said, turning to him, I'm appointing you logistics chief for the City of Dawn Fleet project. From now on, every ton of ore and every drop of fuel moved from the Goblin Kingdom to the floating city will pass through your approval. Whether engines roar on schedule depends on the state of your warehouses. Ron straightened at once, bolstered by the trust and weight of responsibility. Orders flowed through Zero and into the underground network. In the vast mines, thousands of goblins, assisted by animated puppets, began frenzied extraction. In the industrial tier of the floating city, the foundations of a life-scale bioforge rose from the ground. In the command center, the core team gathered around newly rendered fleet blueprints, arguing, refining, and glowing with the pride of architects of a new era. The floating city faction transformed into a precise, humming war machine. The third academic year closed amid sweeping plans and hard, practical work. The triumph of the war passed into history. The voyage to the stars was only beginning. With the first engine's roar, a new era for the City of Dawn Fleet had begun. 267. Panic and Conspiracy at the Ministry of Magic. British Ministry of Magic, Minister's Office. Cornelius Fudge paced the length of the room, his heavy shoes wearing the carpet threadbare. The green bowler he carried everywhere was crushed in his hand like a wad of rotten cabbage leaves. The office was richly appointed, but the carved woodwork looked like the bars of a cage, cold and lifeless. Several parchment reports lay open on the desk. With each read, Fudge grew whiter. The first was from the Goblin Liaison Office. The handwriting wavered. The ink had smudged where the writer's hand had trembled. An indescribable army of monsters, millions, no, tens of millions. The sky split open. A city fell from above. Then a light, one light, and everything was gone. The mountains wept. The second came from the Magical Accidents Reversal Squad, a report from a scout sent underground. The tone was clinical, but the contents chilled the blood. Detected superstandard spatial teleportation. Target City of Dawn confirmed as a Vanguard-class war fortress capable of planar travel. Observed at least 3 first-tier arcanists and 1 second-tier arcane executor, presumed to be Albus Dumbledore, participating in the engagement. Hostile organisms, codenamed Crystal Corroder, were completely eradicated within 3 hours, with no survivors. At the end, a single line in blood-red ink made the conclusion unmistakable. Assessment: the City of Dawn is capable of completely destroying any known wizarding settlement within 24 hours. Dolores Umbridge sat nearby in her signature pink suit, a nauseatingly sweet smile pasted to her face, utterly at odds with the mood in the room. "Minister, do you see?" she purred, voice cloying with forced sympathy. "This is no longer a student's extracurricular venture. This is open military conquest," she continued, unruffled. "Dumbledore and his pupil have carved out an independent state, a kingdom whose power we can barely comprehend." With a thump, Fudge sank into his chair, the leather protesting. Cold sweat ran down his cheeks. He was not cruel, but he was a coward and addicted to power. What he feared most was losing control. Dumbledore, how dare he? What does he want? To topple the ministry? To be another you-know-who? He muttered, voice shaking. Umbridge's smile widened. "No, Minister. You-know-who needed Death Eaters. These people," she flicked a manicured finger, "they need only to lift a finger." The suggestion drained the last of Fudge's courage. He sagged deeper into the chair. What's worse is that we've already lost too many supporters. Malfoy, Nott, Parkinson, these pureblood houses have openly gone to their side. We're becoming a minority in our own country. A spark of eagerness lit Umbridge's eyes. Exactly why, Minister, we must seek foreign aid. This is no longer merely a British matter. It's the very survival of the traditional wizarding world. She rose and moved to the window. The Triwizard Tournament is at hand. That will be our stage. We must show the world what proper, noble magic looks like. Late that night, Fudge sat alone in his office, the green firelight haloing his anxious face as he worked the encrypted communication fireplace. He believed he was forging alliances both vertical and horizontal. The first to appear on the flames was the French Minister of Magic. "Madam, a plague, a contagion of ideas," Fudge spluttered. "They call it Arcane. It ignores bloodline. It despises tradition. Worse, half our pure blood nobility in Britain are already corrupted. The Malfoys have openly become their agents. We must, at the Triwizard Tournament, show the elegance and honor of Beauxbatons and crush their arrogance," he urged. The French minister frowned. "Cornelius, is this Arcane truly so dangerous?" 10,000 times more dangerous than you can imagine," Fudge practically shouted. "They possess a power that can flatten whole wizarding towns in a single day. Their leader won't even admit to being a wizard. He calls himself an arcanist." He rang Karkaroff next, his tone slick with insinuation. "Karkaroff, your past is tainted, as is mine, but now a new Dark Lord has arisen, colder, more methodical than the last. He deals in order. People like us will be the first rubbish to be swept aside. We need Durmstrang's strength on the field to demonstrate iron will and force." For the first time, genuine fear glinted in Karkaroff's shrewd eyes. "Is it all true? Half of Britain's pure-blood families have defected. If that doesn't prove the danger, what will?" Fudge's voice trembled. "Our traditional world is being eaten away." He finished the night by contacting several conservative members of the International Confederation of Wizards, feeding, exaggerating, and inflaming their anxieties about arcane ideology in terms of the International Statute of Secrecy. When he finally ended the last call, he slumped back, his shirt damp with sweat. He exhaled a long, exhausted sigh, and for a moment felt satisfied. Cornelius Fudge, he thought, was saving the wizarding world. In the empty office, his small, anxious figure looked both comical and pitiful. At the same moment, City of Dawn, Command Center. In the corner of a vast holographic display, a small notification box blinked into existence. 0. Detected multiple high-level encrypted communications targeting City of Dawn, intercepted and decrypted. Analysis: a loose, inefficient, fear-driven, anti-arcane alliance is forming. Opponent perceives our expanding influence in Britain as corruption, which betrays their panic. Suggested name: Traditional Guardians Alliance. Threat level: low. Recommended action: no intervention required. Add to observation list. Jason's holographic projection scanned the message, his face unreadable. He waved a hand, and the prompt folded away. All his attention returned to the three-dimensional schematics rotating slowly before him, the keel of the first Vanguard-class frigate taking shape. "Interesting," he said softly, as if inspecting a dish that was neither disappointing nor delightful. Things held together by fear scatter in a single gust of wind. To him, the old world's conspiracies were less than a bothersome annotation on the plans, entirely unimportant and easily ignored. 268. Midsummer's growth and new positioning. The July sun baked the transparent dome of the City of Dawn. The entire floating city felt like a giant steamship, heat waves shimmering in the golden light. Yet everywhere there was a feverish energy. Underground, huge automated mining carts disgorged ore that shimmered with magic, rumbling into teleportation arrays under the guidance of puppet operators and vanishing in flashes of light. Several goblin engineers and alchemists from Weasley's factory crowded around a blueprint, gesturing wildly and shouting, louder than the workshop itself. In the industrial district, the foundation of Biofurnace 1, an inverted, bowl-shaped colossus, was finished, its bottom and inner walls carved with intricate runes. Artisan puppets methodically installed complex energy conduits above it. Pale blue arcane light pulsed through the pipes. The residential level on the second floor, by contrast, was calm and lively. Newly arrived wizard families, each having passed strict background checks, strolled through the Central Park while their children gathered for basic lessons in arcane theory. A fresh, vibrant little society was beginning to take shape. Commander, the first phase of the Dawn Fleet project's preliminary tasks is at 73% overall progress. All department heads are in position and pushing forward with key technological breakthroughs. In the command center, Zero's voice echoed through the spacious hall. Tactical simulation room. The word room was almost inadequate. Inside was the hollow of a vast black sphere. Harry stood alone on the central command platform, surrounded by a 360-degree holographic star map. In that projected star sea, countless points of light marked friend and foe, moving and clashing. Simulated scenario. Enemy is a Star Raider fleet, 30 units strong. Our side is a standard Dawn combat formation, 1 Pathfinder, 2 Vanguard-class ships. Zero's voice was flat. Mission objective: annihilate the enemy while keeping our own battle damage below 20%. Sweat trickled down Harry's brow. He tried the textbook center breakthrough and flank encirclement maneuvers, but the raiders were like rabid dogs, reckless and seemingly unafraid of death, and the tactics barely made a dent. The Pathfinder's shields were bleeding down. During another clumsy evasive turn, Harry glimpsed the enemy formation bunching together to maintain their encirclement. The sight flashed a memory of the chain lightning Arcane Jason had taught him. Strike one target and the effect would jump to the nearest unlucky others. Harry's eyes lit up. Zero! Order Thunder and Storm to abandon conventional salvo patterns, concentrate all energy into their main cannons and overload them to strike the enemy flagship. Simultaneously, all secondary cannons on the Pathfinder, maximum rate of fire, indiscriminate saturation bombardment 300 meters ahead of the flagship. Command conflict. This order will fully expose our flagship's frontal shields and result in severe wasted firepower. Execute order, Harry shouted, voice breaking with will. I don't want a defeat. I want a storm of metal. On the simulation display, the 2 frigates' overloaded main beams forced the enemy flagship to siphon power into defense. The Pathfinder's unleashed fire filled that forward space with a deadly hail of fast metal shrapnel and energy turbulence. The smaller raiders instinctively swarmed toward their flagship to protect it. Now, Thunder, release simulated electromagnetic pulse. Into that storm, an invisible chain lightning erupted. Countless metal fragments became perfect conductors. Current leapt wildly, linking and overloading more than 70% of the enemy ships. The once feared formation seized up, paralyzed over a broad area. Zero was silent for a few heartbeats. Tactical evaluation, breaks convention, uses environment to create chain damage. Highly creative. Simulation ended. Commander Harry Potter, your tactical thinking module rating has been upgraded. Harry sagged into the command chair, breathing hard, but his eyes shone with a confidence he had never felt before. He was no longer only a wizard with a wand. He was growing into a true fleet commander. Inside Zero's laboratory, a fist-sized origin crystal core floated in the center of an energy field, slowly rotating. Hermione and Professor Snape leaned over a holographic workbench that displayed an extremely complex genetic rune chain, 2 intertwined double helix patterns. The problem is here, Hermione said, pointing to a flickering red node on the model, worry creasing her brow. We want to fuse the toughness of mithril with the energy conductivity of dragonblood wood at a genetic rune level, but the frequencies of their rune structures fundamentally conflict. Every simulated fusion collapses. Snape stood arms folded, his somber eyes fixed on the model. Guided by his potion maker's instinct, he said, "The issue isn't fusion, it's neutralization. In potioncraft, when 2 volatile substances conflict, you introduce a third component. It does nothing on its own, but it's extremely stable, used as a buffer." He paused, then added, almost with a touch of dry humor, like slug mucus. Buffer. Hermione's face brightened, as if struck by lightning. She pulled up genetic models of various basic substances on the workbench, fingers flying as she sifted through possibilities. Yes, we need an inert but highly affined genetic fragment to bridge the 2 rune chains. Her cursor stopped on a fragment, the gene of a common moss, ubiquitous in the magical world. She held her breath and carefully slotted the moss gene between the 2 rune chains. The flashing red alarm vanished. The previously incompatible rune structures eased toward each other, and under the Moss gene's mediating influence, they formed a stable, elegant new structure. At that moment, Jason's holographic projection appeared in the lab. Well done. Hermione, you've turned knowledge into creativity. Professor Snape, your experience is giving birth to new life. Hermione's cheeks flushed, pride swelled within her. Side by side with Jason, she felt she had truly become a partner. The capital of the Goblin Kingdom, the city of Rust Iron, burned with industry. In the core furnace hall, giant forges spewed flame. Goblin artisans hammered bright metal, and the air was thick with oil and sulfur. Ron, in a tailored explorer's outfit, faced a bearded, gruff goblin mining chieftain, Angerhammer. No! Angerhammer's roar rattled eardrums. The black iron vein is our tribe's ancestral property. Why should we hand it over to you sky dwellers to mine? Ron showed no fear, nor any airs of diplomatic pretense. He pulled a worn wizard's chess set from his pocket and set it on a nearby low table. Chief Angerhammer, I heard you're the Underdark's chess king, undefeated for 50 years. I'm just a country boy from the surface, hoping to learn the game from you. Angerhammer paused, then snorted in contempt before sitting. The game began. Ron lost badly at first, but through sheer tenacity and a deep, patient understanding of the game, he ground the match into an endgame. Then he made a brilliant, risky move. He sacrificed his rook, but forced Angerhammer's king into a corner. The chieftain stared at the board, his volatile face flickering through emotions, and finally slammed his palm on the table and burst out laughing. Good lad, bold, and clever. You're right, damn it. Instead of letting that vein gather dust, let it become ore for a skyship. That's goblin glory. The ore is yours. Thunderous cheers erupted. Ron stood amid the din with a genuine smile. He had found his place, not for the power of his magic, but for his sincerity, his kindness, and that obsession with wizard's chess his friends always teased about. That odd little obsession had become the perfect tool for dealing with straightforward goblins. He felt steadier and more accomplished than he had at Hogwarts. Back at the City of Dawn Command Center, the sun sank toward the horizon. Jason stood before the holographic star map, watching progress markers tick forward. Zero's voice reported again. Commander, all department reports have been integrated. Commander Harry's tactical simulation score meets the standard. Madam Hermione and Professor Snape's biomaterial research has achieved a breakthrough, estimated to triple hull strength. Mr. Weasley has secured the black iron vein mining rights. Resources will support construction for 3 Vanguard-class frigates. A small curve appeared at Jason's mouth. Very good. Everyone is finding their own path. He turned and looked out as night crept in. There are still a few days left of summer. When school starts, we'll be stepping into a brand new beginning. A true fleet, a true civilization. Starlight spilled across the floating city, illuminating every corner of the dawn. 69. Rebirth of a pioneer city of dawn, shipyard number 1. Thousands of alchemical lamps hung from the rafters, leaving no shadows, picking out every detail of the steel behemoth in the center of the dock, the Pathfinder. It filled nearly the entire shipyard, casting a shadow large enough to swallow a small town. Its hull had been repaired with a strange but striking harmony. Old goblin brass armor, scarred and nicked by time, sat beside new plates of active metal that shimmered with a dark luster. The old was a scar, the new was a blade. Dense arcane runes, as fine as silver capillaries, traced the hull from bow to engine nozzles, looking as if living currents might begin surging through them at any moment. Energy parameters, 1.72, 1.71, stable. Fred's voice crackled through the communicator. George Weasley floated on a magic platform nearby, sweat beading on his forehead and dripping onto his crimson alchemical goggles. In his hand, the tip of the branding pen gathered a ball of thermal energy as he carved the last and most critical rune, the energy tuning stabilization matrix, on the outer armor of the bridge. This was the pacemaker for the whole ship. The final stroke landed. Buzz. A humming radiated from the tip of the pen. Immediately, the silver rune network covering the entire hull lit up as one, as if electrified. The silver light ran like blood along every line, converging from every corner of the ship and pouring into the bridge's core with a blinding flash before slowly dimming. Fred stared at the datapad in his hands as thousands of red alarm parameters flipped to green in a single heartbeat. George, Fred whispered, throat dry. We did it. George floated down to the deck, his legs weak, almost collapsing. He wiped his brow and grinned like a fool. On the observation gallery high above the shipyard, Jason, Harry, Hermione, Ron, Dumbledore, Snape, and the other core members watched. They looked down at the monster below, this creature born of everyone's ingenuity and sweat, and their chests swelled with the same fierce pride. "Welcome aboard, everyone," the Weasley brothers announced before Pathfinder's massive airtight hatch, standing as if kings unveiling their kingdom. "Come meet our child," Fred said. "She's a bit temperamental, but she's absolutely reliable," George added. One by one, they filed inside. "Whoa!" Harry was the first to the bridge. He spotted the commander's seat at the center, more imposing than the Slytherin Dean's throne, and in front of it, a smooth, obsidian-like crystal control panel. It was still dark, but Harry could already imagine it lighting up and projecting a vast holographic tactical map. This is a million times cooler than a firebolt." He breathed. He didn't hold back. He sat and grabbed the armrests. A rush of thrilling responsibility shot up from his tailbone to the top of his head. Hermione and Snape, however, slipped away to the energy room in the ship's belly. Here there were no roaring boilers or choking steam. Instead, it felt like a living greenhouse. Thick, translucent bioenergy pipelines ran along the ceiling and walls like arteries. Through the pipe walls, faint blue arcane energy flowed slowly, bathing the room in a soothing glow. Hermione reached out and touched the slightly warm pipe. It's alive," she whispered, voice full of tenderness. Snape, who habitually pushed up non-existent glasses, scanned the energy monitors with those sharp, dispassionate eyes. "Energy cycle loss approaching 0, he said. "This is impossible with traditional alchemy." "Hey, come look at this," Ron shouted from the lower deck. They hurried to the cargo hold to find him staring at a sight that made his mouth hang open as if to swallow an egg. Several automated loading golems were effortlessly lifting a metal block the size of a shipping container and placing it precisely on the endless, empty shelves. He jabbed a finger at the racks, eyes glittering with galleons. "Merlin's beard. With this thing, I could haul a month of Goblin Kingdom production in a single trip." Sirius had found himself a cozy spot near the engine room. A nest of warm stones sheltered the earth elemental Panshi, sprawling and snoring contentedly. The engine's low-frequency vibration and steady heat were for it the perfect lullaby and electric blanket. After the tour, everyone returned to the bridge. Tension hung in the air, charged with anticipation, as if they were about to witness a new dawn. The Weasley brothers sat at the main console, fingers poised over key activation buttons, breathing as if not to disturb fate. Harry returned to the commander's seat, hands white on the armrests. The others found positions in the observation area and held their breath. Jason's holographic projection flickered into being above the console and studied the expectant faces. "Begin," he said. "Let our first Pathfinder open its eyes." George drew a deep breath and pressed the first button. "Energy core unlocked." Boom! A deep hum rose from the warship's belly, the first breath of a great beast waking. The bridge floor trembled. Fred pushed the energy valve. "Arcane energy, inject!" The bioenergy pipelines flared to life. A flood of pale blue energy flowed through them, bathing the interior in a dreamlike glow. "Goblin steam circulation system, activate." Click, click, boom. Ancient machinery started to turn with a powerful, living noise. Giant pistons moved. Scalding steam billowed from exhaust ports along the hull, threaded with bright blue electric arcs. The old era's mechanical force fused with the new era's arcane energy. "Anti-gravity rune array, activate!" Harry roared the final command. The shipyard shuddered. A titanic airflow surged from beneath Pathfinder, sweeping away years of dust and stirring a small whirlwind. The Pathfinder gave its first roar since rebirth, a mixture of arcane hum and hissing steam. Inch by inch, the hundreds of meters long, tens of thousands of tons steel colossus rose from the ground and hovered in the shipyard's midair, its immense shadow swallowing the figures below. It was done. The silence broke into an avalanche of cheers. The Weasley brothers embraced, laughing and crying. Ron and Harry punched each other's shoulders, whooping so hard it seemed they might topple. Hermione watched with bright, shining eyes. Jason's projection lingered on the floating city visible through the transparent porthole, a hint of a smile touching his voice. "It's not just a ship," he said. "It's the crystallization of all our wisdom, our first step toward the sea of stars." He looked over everyone. "Remember today, from now on we are no longer merely wizards guarding a city. We are pathfinders." The camera of their perspective pulled back from the bridge, through the transparent porthole, and out to a sweeping view of the Pathfinder suspended in the great shipyard. Its engines pulsed steady and strong, announcing its rebirth to the world and to the endless stars. Its journey had not yet begun, but destiny already called. 270. Dawn Fleet. The City of Dawn common room held the core members of their little circle. Flames danced in the fireplace, throwing warm light over young faces. Only one night of summer vacation remained. Tomorrow, they would make the journey to King's Cross and return to the familiar, somehow distant towers of Hogwarts. The mood was easy and warm, with a hint of melancholy at the parting to come. "Merlin's beard. I bet these sleeves are an inch shorter again." Ron grumbled as he wrestled a faded Gryffindor robe into his suitcase. Hermione paid him no mind. She sat beside a stack of books, parchment in hand, checking the new term's book list with the meticulous care of someone afraid to miss a rare volume. Harry leaned against the window, polishing his holly wand with a soft cloth. He thought about classmates he would see again, the wind on the Quidditch pitch, and the new school year that promised to be anything but peaceful. Inside the room, everything felt removed from the turbulent currents running through the wider, magical world. A soft blue light bloomed in the center of the common room. Jason's holographic projection shimmered into being and cut through the chatter. His gaze seemed to look straight through them, as if he could see their thoughts. "You can pack your things later," he said. "Before your third year officially begins, I have a graduation gift." "A gift?" Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged looks of wide-eyed curiosity. Jason didn't elaborate. "Come to the central airfield," he said, and his gaze settled on Harry. "Some things you can only understand by seeing them with your own eyes." Under the night sky, the central airfield spread like a frozen black ocean. City lights in the distance glittered like scattered stars, making the airfield seem even more desolate and mysterious. In the center, moored like a silent mountain of steel, sat the massive ship Pathfinder. Under the interplay of night and alchemical lights, its hybrid of classical and futuristic design gave it an oppressive grandeur the dry dock never had. When they arrived, the sight left them breathless. Jason stood at the platform's edge, night wind lifting his white hair. He led them forward. "Look, this is what we produced over the summer," he said, gesturing toward the Pathfinder. "It's enormous," Ron said, unable to hide his awe. "No," Jason interrupted. "It's only the beginning." He looked up at the sky, then snapped his fingers. "0, light them up." At his command, something that had been hidden in the Pathfinder's shadow detonated into being. 2 rows of giant searchlights flared, tearing twin shafts of light through the night. Those beams fell across 2 warships they had never seen before, sleek silhouettes that radiated menace. Smaller than the Pathfinder, roughly a third of its length, these ships were built from a dark, active metal, their hulls free of decoration, composed of lethal angles and streamlined forms designed for speed. If the Pathfinder was a battle-hardened knight weighed down by history, these 2 craft were raptors of the void, born to hunt and strike with efficiency, the aesthetic of future slaughter. Jason's voice broke through their stunned silence. "These are our first-generation warships, designed and cultivated by the #1 biofoundry, the Vanguard-class frigates." He pointed to the more aggressive ship on the left. "This one's called Thunder." The name struck like a current through Harry's chest. It felt oddly familiar and immediate. Jason pointed to the right. "This one's Storm." There was barely time to process the revelation. Jason gave another simple command into the night. 0, fleet, take off. Execute Dawn Patrol Array. The world seemed to hold its breath, then exploded. The engines of all 3 ships ignited in perfect synchronization. The Pathfinder, in the middle, emitted a deep, heavy roar like the breathing of some giant beast. The 2 Vanguard-class frigates wailed with high-pitched fury like raptors in flight. From 6 massive nozzles blazed 3 shades of blue flame that washed the platform in dreamlike light. An immense anti-gravity field pushed the air outward and formed a visible shockwave, Cloaks billowed and Ron staggered, nearly losing his footing until Harry caught him. Then the three ships rose, as if defying the very idea of gravity. They climbed higher and higher until their hulls obscured the stars and moon. Above the City of Dawn, they fell into a flawless triangular formation, the Pathfinder leading like a colossus and thunder and storm flanking it like sentries. From below, the sight made words fail them. This was not mere magic. This was the authority of a civilization built out of steel, energy, and precise law. It was an absolute power. Merlin's beard, Ron finally muttered. What have we made? Hermione gripped Jason's hand so tightly her knuckles shone, tears forming in her eyes. Jason looked down from the edge of the floating city at the endless clouds below. Through gaps in the mist, the lights of the mortal and old magic worlds twinkled faintly. The engine's glow painted the contours of his face. The Ministry of Magic wants to parade their ridiculous traditions with the Triwizard Tournament and tell the world what magic should look like, he said, almost coldly. Then he raised his hand and swept it at the three steel behemoths hanging over the city. We will tell the world something else. The future is in the sky, in other worlds. At his words, all three engine lights flared like newborn suns, blazing so bright the night seemed like day. In that instant, the third school year came to an end in a way no one there could have imagined. And in the hearts of those who watched, a storm was born, one that threatened to overturn the entire order of the magical world. 271, the train back to school and gazing at the sky. September 1st, King's Cross Station. The usual bustle and the roar of steam filled the air, but on platform 9 3/4, there was a taut, suppressed tension. When Jason and his group stepped through the barrier, pushing their luggage trolleys, the chatter on the platform died away. They had chosen not to apparat straight to Hogwarts. Jason had insisted on experiencing the return trip like ordinary students. They were no longer ordinary. Jason wore a simple white robe, but his calm, commanding presence drew every eye. Harry, Ron, and Hermione followed closely. A summer's growth had stripped away some of their youth, making them stand out among the other pupils. Then someone hurried forward and set the crowd abuzz. Lucius Malfoy. Gone was the haughty bearing of a pure-blood noble. He was in a perfectly tailored black suit, his platinum hair pulled back neatly, and his face wore the deferential expression of a first-rate butler. He bowed, clearing a path for Jason's group, and handed over a document with both hands. "Master," he whispered, yet the single word rang out and rippled through every ear tuned to the platform. "This is the Ministry of Magic's latest procedure for the Triwizard delegations. I have already handled the unnecessary formalities for you." The address "Master" detonated through the crowd. Draco Malfoy followed his father, clad in a new, pristine Slytherin uniform and looking pale. When Draco's eyes met Harry and Ron's, his face flashed with a complicated mix of awe, envy, and embarrassment. But when he saw Jason, he stiffened, bowed his head slightly, and said in a quiet, practiced voice, "Mr. Lester." He was no longer Harry Potter's adversary. He was an outsider student, trying to inhabit a new role, hungry for any sign of approval from Jason. Nearby, Pansy Parkinson and the other Slytherin girls watched, mouths open but silent. To see the Malfoys so utterly subdued, father bowing to a student, was more shocking than any spell. In a shadowed corner of the platform, Auror Captain Kingsley Shacklebolt watched through a specially crafted magic eye. Seeing Lucius Malfoy, once a pillar of the Wizengamot and a champion of pure-blood supremacy, bow and call a student master nearly made him lose his composure. He understood then that things were far worse than the Ministry had guessed. Jason's influence had crept like a vine into the heart of the Ministry's power. The Hogwarts Express blew its long whistle and eased out of the station. Inside one of the roomy compartments, the mood was very different from the scene outside. "The first shipment of black iron ore the Goblin Kingdom promised will be delivered in full to the City of Dawn before October," Jason said evenly. "Ron, coordinate the resource allocation and transport routes with Chief Wrathhammer." "No problem. Those goblins treat me like a brother now." Ron thumped his chest, brimming with confidence. "Hermione, the genetic optimization work on the active metal must continue. I need its adaptability increased by another 50% within 6 months. Professor Snape's potion factory will cooperate fully with you. Understood. Hermione nodded, bright-eyed. I'll get started on the sequencing changes right away. Harry, I've granted you full command authority for the Thunder. This term, you'll need to complete over 1,000 simulated engagements. 0 will draw up the strictest training program. Yes. Harry clenched his fists, eyes alight with determination. They spoke of fleets and resources, of training regimens and the future of a floating city, subjects far beyond anything the other students in the train were thinking about as they passed around Bertie Bott's every flavor beans. In the next compartment, Draco Malfoy sat ramrod straight. His duty was simple but important: prevent anyone from interrupting the strategic meeting happening nearby. It was the first real assignment he'd been given, and he took it seriously. When a group of curious first-year Gryffindors tried to peer in, Draco rose and blocked the doorway, his voice a near-perfect imitation of Snape's. Mr. Lester is occupied and does not wish to be disturbed. I imagine you do not want to be disturbed either, do you? Startled by his dark gaze, the first years scurried away. Halfway across the Highlands, Draco straightened, smoothed his collar, and knocked on the main compartment's door. Given permission, he entered and bowed. Sir, Father sent word, he said, keeping his voice steady. The Ministry has raised security for the Bogsbatons and Durmstrang delegations to the highest level. Fudge seems determined to use the Triwizard Tournament to reassert the Ministry's authority. Jason skimmed the paper in his hand and hummed. Understood. Tell him to keep an eye on it. You're doing well. Those 4 words, you're doing well, lit Draco from the inside. Pride straightened his spine and pushed a thrill through him. The train tore across the Scottish countryside. Above the clouds, 2 aurors on broomsticks, cloaks making them nearly invisible, followed at a distance. Their spirits matched the gloomy sky. They cursed the minister under their breath as they tracked a force that had already put the Malfoys under its sway. Suddenly, the younger auror gripped his broom so hard his knuckles whitened and pointed ahead, trembling. Captain, look at the sky. The senior auror looked up. The clouds appeared to split as if by an invisible hand. First to appear was the mountain-sized bow of the Pathfinder, followed by the thunder and the storm at its flanks, like lethal birds of prey. 3 immense steel warships glided out of the clouds. Their shadows swallowed the land below and rendered the 2 broomsticks, tiny in comparison, nearly invisible. 272, the carriage in the sky and the ghost ship in the deep sea. The young auror felt a suffocating wave of despair wash over him. For a few breathless seconds, the massive fleet hovered in the clouds, then slowly dissolved into the mist as if it had never been there at all. Inside the train compartment, Harry and Ron were still chuckling about Draco's disgruntled, yet oddly earnest expression from earlier. Hermione turned her clear gaze toward Jason. You let Draco come in to report, didn't you? She asked softly. To make him feel needed, to make him lean closer to us. Jason set the papers in his hand down and allowed a small, unreadable smile to appear. He neither confirmed nor denied. He watched the landscape blur past the window and spoke in a measured tone. Every piece on the board has to find its place. Remember, he used to be our enemy. I don't want to make more. At dusk, a cool autumn wind swept across the lawn before Hogwarts. All the students had been ordered to gather there, waiting for guests who had traveled far. The air hummed with excited whispers as everyone craned their necks, guessing how the ancient schools of Beauxbatons and Durmstrang would make their entrances. They'll ride hippogriffs, a Hufflepuff shouted. No, apparition. Imagine a whole crowd appearing at once, a Ravenclaw countered. At the edge of the noisy throng, Jason stood with Harry, Hermione, Ron, and Draco, a small calm amid the bustle. Draco turned his head and murmured to Ron in a conspiratorial tone, My father's notes say Beauxbaton's carriages are carved from a single flawless moonstone, pure luxury. Ron scrunched his face. Fine, but can it be as big as an engine compartment on our Pathfinder? Draco blinked, then nodded. Their horizons had shifted. Once you had seen the true sea of stars, a ground-bound carriage seemed small indeed. Ah, our guests have arrived! Dumbledore's voice rang across the lawn. All heads tilted upward. A dark dot grew in the distant sky and became an enormous pale blue carriage drawn by 12 great Palomino horses, each with broad wings that stirred the air. Their hooves struck the sky with crisp sounds, as if stepping on invisible stairs. The carriage itself was vast, almost like a flying pavilion, its surface glowing in the last light of sunset. Large gemstones embedded along its frame flashed with French elegance. It sliced through the clouds and settled gracefully on the grass, the breeze it made gentle as a lover's sigh. The door opened, and an exceptionally tall woman stepped out, Madame Olympe Maxime, headmistress of Beauxbatons. Behind her came elegant students in blue silk robes, and among them a girl with silver hair and startling beauty, Fleur Delacour. "Good evening, Albus. You look so young I almost don't recognize you." Madame Maxime extended her hand. Her voice rang like a bell. "Good evening, Olympe. This is what Arcane has done for us." Dumbledore smiled and shook her hand. At that contact, Madame Maxime's pupils narrowed. A chill seemed to radiate from Dumbledore, an odd mix of youth and something ancient she had never felt before. Could this be the Arcane everyone whispered about? Albus Dumbledore before her could have been no older than 30, vital and vigorous, not the kindly old man she remembered. Her gaze swept involuntarily over the professors beside him. McGonagall, Flitwick, Snape, each carried a tightly restrained energy, powerful and coiled as if ready to erupt. Hogwarts. What had happened here? Had the rumors been true, of a young wizard attempting to overturn the old order? A small, wary knot of suspicion and vigilance formed in the giantess's heart. Before anyone could fully absorb Beauxbaton's spectacular arrival, the lake beside the castle made everyone gasp. "Look at the Black Lake!" someone shrieked. The placid surface suddenly boiled and churned as enormous bubbles burst upward. With a thunderous, bone-rattling roar, a ghostly vessel, seemingly crafted from skeletons and decayed wood, broke through the water and rose from the depths. Tattered black sails hung from a hull whose mast jutted like the ribs of some colossal beast. A deadly, penetrating cold seeped from the ship, and the air around it grew noticeably colder. A gangplank descended to the shore. Igor Karkaroff, headmaster of Durmstrang, stepped off first, wrapped in heavy furs, followed by stern-faced students. Victor Krum led the procession, his presence like a dark, silent wave. Karkaroff wore a practiced smile, but his eyes swept the crowd with a snake-like quickness. When they fell on a familiar figure, Lucius Malfoy, standing behind Dumbledore in a posture of solemn deference, the smile stalled on his face. Lucius, subordinate to Dumbledore? Karkaroff's chest tightened. He had known the pride and status of the Malfoys in the darker circles. Such a sight made no sense against everything he'd understood. His gaze flicked across the students and landed on a pair of calm, golden eyes, Jason Lester's. The moment their eyes met, Karkaroff felt his soul seized by an invisible hand and hurled into an endless, icy void. It was a coercion of scale, an overwhelming pressure that no conspirator, no ambition, not even the Dark Lord himself could encompass. Karkaroff's face drained of color. Cold sweat soaked his furs. In that instant, he understood. The Dark Lord's plans, so carefully laid, were likely to run straight into an iron wall he had not accounted for. The great hall glittered with candlelight and the familiar star-speckled ceiling. Yet tonight, the air was different. Tense, expectant. Between the long house tables, two foreign contingents sat awkwardly, looking out of place. Beauxbaton students, robed in blue silk, craned their necks with polite curiosity. The Durmstrang students, bundled in thick furs, wore stern expressions and an untamed air that jarred against the banquet hall's civilized atmosphere. Whispers, furtive glances, and a low, almost tangible tension passed between the three groups. At the head table, the scene was no less strange. Igor Karkaroff and Madame Maxime took their places, both uneasy. Beside Dumbledore's usual seat, in the very center of the table, an empty chair waited, clearly reserved for someone of far higher rank. Minister Cornelius Fudge and Barty Crouch, head of the Department of International Magical Cooperation, were present as well. Fudge lifted a goblet and offered insincere pleasantries to Lucius Malfoy. "Lucius, you're looking remarkably well. You really must come to the Ministry's exhibition." "Of course, Minister," Lucius replied with a flawless smile. "The House of Malfoy has always supported the prosperity of the magical world." They both smiled, but Fudge and Crouch knew the truth. Lucius was no longer a donor beholden to the Ministry and could not be toyed with as before. At the Gryffindor table, Victor Krum, usually melancholy and withdrawn, looked surprised. His gaze had settled on a girl absorbed in a book, Hermione Granger. To Crumb she exuded a rare kind of presence, knowledge accumulated into gravitas, a potent magic tempered by trials. Not as immediately striking as Fleur, he thought, but deeper, more enduring. He noticed, too, that Hermione's attention was quietly, almost imperceptibly, drifting toward the empty seat beside her, toward the boy named Jason Lester. Across the hall at the Slytherin table, Draco Malfoy had fallen into a different kind of performance. Surrounded by classmates, he'd set aside his usual sneer in favor of an air of instruction, expounding, at just the surface level Jason permitted, on the basics of a floating city. "So what you call magic is just the primary form of energy," Draco said, all swagger. "True arcane taps the world's fundamental laws. Take the anti-gravity matrix in the City of Dawn. It doesn't merely counteract a levitation charm, it counteracts gravity itself, understand?" His tone brimmed with superiority. In a few sentences, he had divided Slytherin into two camps, those who understood arcane and those who did not. As the hall grew livelier with this strange mix of curiosity and one-upmanship, the great oak doors swung open. Conversation died in an instant. The figure who entered did not cause mere recognition. He struck everyone who knew him with a primitive, bone-deep dread. This was not the kindly, elderly Dumbledore. He had returned in the prime of life, about 30 years old, long silver hair falling to his shoulders, eyes a fathomless, almost inhuman azure. With each step he radiated a pressure that seemed to reach into the very root of life itself, the unmistakable aura of a second-order arcanist. Every witch and wizard in the hall felt it, an involuntary awe, a trembling as if a lesser creature stood before a higher being. At the head table, panic followed one undignified scene after another. Cornelius Fudge shot to his feet so fast his goblet clattered to the floor, splattering red wine. Igor Karkaroff went paler than he had after seeing Jason earlier. He gripped the armrest until his knuckles whitened, lips trembling with fear. Madame Maxime covered her mouth. Even her giant blood ran cold and her massive frame trembled. In that presence, all size and lineage counted for nothing. They were, all of them, mere mortals before a deity. The new Dumbledore paid them no heed. Smiling gently, he took the reserved central seat. He cleared his throat and spoke. "Welcome, friends from afar, to Hogwarts." He gave no explanation for his changed appearance. He simply moved on to the point. "This year, we are honored to host the Triwizard Tournament." His gaze swept the hall before settling on the students of Beauxbatons and Durmstrang. "I hope you understand that this competition is not merely a friendly exchange between three schools," he continued. "It is also an opportunity for the entire magical world to see, at the dawn of a new era, the forms magic will take as it embraces a broader future." No sooner had the words left his lips than Barty Crouch, suddenly alert, hurried with ministry staff to the center of the hall, carrying an ancient, jewel-encrusted wooden chest. He opened it to reveal the rough wooden goblet of fire. Dumbledore stepped forward and tapped the goblet with his wand. Blue-white flames leapt from its rim, and a powerful ancient contract magic spread through the hall. Even so, under Dumbledore's overwhelming aura, the goblet's magic seemed small, almost dim. Dumbledore announced the 17-year age limit and idly drew a shimmering golden line around the goblet, an age ward whose magical fluctuations were stronger than the goblet itself. He smiled at the eager faces below and added one last remark as the feast wound down. "Of course, to ensure absolute fairness and to prevent any malicious interference with the goblet's selection," he said, a playful tilt to his voice, "we have prepared an additional safeguard. You will learn what it is tomorrow." Those words hit Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as Mad-Eye Moody, like a bucket of ice. He tightened his grip on his wand. Things were slipping away from the Dark Lord's carefully planned script. The start-of-term feast ended in that peculiar mix of excitement, bewilderment, unease, and fear. 274. The rules of the Goblet of Fire and the Chains of Arcane Magic. Dumbledore's mention of extra insurance sent a shot of adrenaline through Hogwarts. Overnight, the Triwizard Tournament exploded into everyone's conversation. As dawn light slipped into the Gryffindor common room, Fred and George huddled over a scrap of parchment, whispering like conspirators. "The aging potion is too obvious. Only a fool would try it," Fred muttered. But if we brew some kind of alchemical confundo, maybe we can trick that age line, make it think we're 17. Brilliant. George's eyes flashed. Our alchemy workshop just got a new shipment. Down in the Slytherin dungeons, the mood was more pragmatic. A circle of older purebloods leaned over a table, calculating with cold intent. The Goblet of Fire is an ancient relic. It doesn't respond to raw power. It recognizes bloodline and glory. Our chances are far better than those mudbloods, one of them declared. Excitement and restlessness crawled through every stone of the castle. Only the corner where the core team worked remained unusually calm. Harry, wearing special goggles, stared at a data panel that replayed combat footage of the Thunder against simulated enemy ships. Hermione at the far end tapped a light screen so fast her fingers were a blur. Complex equations and genetic sequences flowed under her touch as she organized optimizations for Biofurnace number 1. Their battlefield was elsewhere now. A curious first-year Gryffindor sidled up, unable to keep from asking, "Ron, why aren't you guys signing up? That's eternal glory." Ron, directing a few small alchemical automatons to help tidy his school bag, answered casually, "Eternal glory? We're making it. No time to win it." After breakfast, students and the Bosbatons and Durmstrang delegations were summoned to the Great Hall to witness Dumbledore's extra insurance. In the center of the hall, the blue-white flames of the Goblet of Fire flickered, ringed by an intimidating age ward. Dumbledore stood beside it, his aura restored and more commanding than the goblet itself. His clear voice carried across the room. "To ensure the sanctity and absolute fairness of the Goblet of Fire's contract, I am honored to invite the creator of the City of Dawn, the foremost arcane genius of our era, Mr. Jason Lester," he announced, turning his gaze to the student section. "Mr. Lester will apply an authenticity notarization to the goblet using the arcane laws he commands." The hall erupted. Cornelius Fudge went ashen. Igor Karkaroff's pupils shrank to pinpricks, and Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as Mad-Eye Moody, felt his magical eye spin with a cold, ghostly horror. Under the stunned gazes of everyone, especially those distinguished guests, Jason rose and walked to the goblet. He paused before its ancient wooden base and casually brushed his hand across it, as if dusting. There was a faint sound, so soft most wizards would have missed it. A filament of golden order runes blossomed from the void, coalescing into an exquisitely intricate shackle that settled over the goblet's base, and then in a flash, vanished. At that instant, a supreme, absolute aura of law, pure causality, swept through the great hall like a glimpse of something divine, and then was gone. It happened so quickly, many assumed it was an illusion. For a few, it felt like divine punishment. Jason withdrew his hand and faced the bewildered crowd. "This arcane notarization will not interfere with the Goblet of Fire's normal selection," he said. "It simply adds a foundational judgment to its rules." He paused, then stated the new constraint plainly and without flourish. "From now on, any name submitted through deception, confundo charms, aging potions, or similar tricks will not result in being chosen, because this barrier removes that possibility from the most fundamental causal chain." He let the words settle. "Henceforth, only those who genuinely desire glory and victory from the depths of their souls will be perceived by the goblet." Silence fell heavy over the great hall. A hand hidden in a sleeve trembled for the first time from an unexpected turn. Barty Crouch Jr.'s blood ran cold. He had spent a summer preparing, devising dozens of concealed confundo enchantments and risking exposure to infiltrate Hogwarts himself. Now all his meticulous plans were rendered useless, not by a counterspell, but by a fundamental change in the rules. They hadn't thought to fight his magic. Someone had simply changed the game on a higher level. It was, in a sense, a dimensionality reduction strike. "Dumbledore!" Fudge's shriek tore through the quiet. His face flushing, he pointed at Jason and accused, "This is an open desecration of sacred magical traditions. How can you allow such unknown, crooked methods to pollute the Goblet of Fire?" Dumbledore only smiled gently. "Cornelius, quite the contrary. I am protecting the fairness we all value in a more reliable, more advanced way. You needn't worry." His gaze sharpened and pierced Fudge's eyes as if to say there was no room for objection. "Do you perhaps think fairness itself is a desecration?" Fudge stood dumbfounded, mouth open, unable to reply. Jason had not broken any rule. He had used a higher-order arcane technique to cover gaps in the old, loophole-ridden system. From that moment, the Triwizard Tournament slipped from any script anyone had written. It was no longer a predictable contest anyone could control. 275. Desire, Farce, and the Invisible Backdoor. The arcane notarization Jason had added to the Goblet of Fire had upended the way the whole game was played. Rather than dampening the students' excitement, it made them study the rules with a zeal that bordered on obsession, none more so than Fred and George Weasley. Every day, the ancient goblet in the entrance hall was ringed with students. Older pupils, amid raucous cheers, would toss slips of parchment with their names into the blue-white flames. And the Weasley twins were the most conspicuous figures of all. "Listen, George," Fred said, propping up an alchemy drawing board covered in frantic scribbles. He analyzed it with mock solemnity. "Dumbledore's age line is basically a magic fluctuation identification array, but Jason's barrier, that's a soul imprint verification." "It doesn't check how old you are," George finished, eyes bright with mischief. "It checks whether the intent behind submitting your name is genuine. Any hint of trickery gets cut off by that thing called causality." "Exactly," Fred slapped his thigh. "So we can't just fool it. We have to persuade it. Bypass the age line's physical judgment, then convince the soul verification that our desire is real." After several sleepless nights in their workshop, they produced a bubbling rainbow-hued solvent that gave off a strange glow. They christened it with a grand name, the timestamp Confundo Alchemy Solvent. It was supposed to temporarily affix a phantom label of a future 17-year-old, theoretically enough to fool the array's scan. At noon, under every eye in the hall, the twins marched up to the age line. "For glory! For the joke shop!" they shouted in unison, then downed the bottle as if it were soda. Hand in hand, hearts pounding, they charged into the golden light. For a moment, it looked like their plan had worked. They passed through the age line, neither thrown back nor sprouting absurd beards. The crowd erupted in cheers. Fred and George waved triumphantly and pulled out their parchments, trembling as they prepared to thrust them into the Goblet of Fire. Then, buzz. The faint golden runic halo that always circled the goblet's base flared to life. It wasn't a blinding blast, rather a gentle, inexorable force pushed the twins back, setting them down neatly on the cushion outside the age line, unhurt. Silence fell over the hall. Then everyone pointed, and laughter tore through the room. Fred's hair, usually a vivid red, had gone a warning signal crimson, like a fatal error on an alchemist's board. George's hair had turned a definite blue, like a program's request denied dialogue. The twins stared at each other, then at their hands in shock, fingers brushing the bizarrely colored hair. Dumbledore smiled and stepped forward. With a small wave of his wand, he restored their hair to its normal red. He didn't scold them. Instead, he patted each on the shoulder, eyes full of approval. "Although you failed, your innovation, trying to understand magic from its rules, is commendable," he said. "This is worth more than 100 successful aging potion trials." Praised by the headmaster, Fred and George left with their heads held high, half laughing at the joke-turned spectacle. Their farce became the liveliest interlude before the Triwizard Tournament. Meanwhile, at the other end of the castle in Moody's office, the air was so still it felt like a physical thing. Bang! Barty Crouch Jr. slammed a heavy dark arts tome to the floor and growled like an animal. The eye that wasn't the magical one was bloodshot and veined. He looked frayed to the breaking point. On the table before him stood an obsidian replica of the Goblet of Fire, its base ringed with a faint golden circle he'd simulated with magic. For days he had hardly slept, trying every dark curse and confundus he knew, from vile soul deception hexes to secret ancient arts of mind-bending. None of them worked. Every spell, no matter how malign or odd, dissolved the instant it hit that simulated golden ring. Not even a ripple. His attempts with raw, chaotic magic were being stopped absolutely. That boy Jason Lester had, by some method Barty could not fathom, nullified everything he tried. Desperation pushed him to abandon magic as his first strategy. If he couldn't cheat the barrier with spells, he would look for a legal backdoor. He buried himself in the restricted section's oldest school regulations and every historical document on the Triwizard Tournament he could find. If magic was a dead end, maybe the rules weren't. He had to find a loophole, a legitimate procedural way to nominate an extra champion for Hogwarts. This was his last and only chance. At Hogwarts, in a private research lab not open to the public, the night sky outside the floor-to-ceiling windows seemed bottomless. But inside the room, it was as bright as day. Jason and Hermione sat side by side before a massive light screen that showed, in real time, the scene in Moody's office. A tiny alchemical probe fed the image of Barty Crouch Jr.'s frantic, fueled attempts to the screen. "He's actually trying to break your law barrier?" Hermione said, watching spells evaporate at the simulated ring. "It's like banging curses against a brick wall." Jason shut off the monitor with a casual smile. "He can't break it. That thing is beyond this world's magical system." He tapped the screen and brought up a digitized copy of Hogwarts at Regulations, but I did leave him a back door. He slid his finger to an ancient clause, long hidden under dust and numerous amendments, rarely read anymore. Hermione leaned closer and read aloud, "To address sudden or extreme events that may endanger the collective honor of the school, with the consent of the other two judges, or in the absence of two judges, the acting professor of the host school shall have emergency authority to nominate an additional champion on behalf of the school." Hermione's mind moved like a match struck. The pieces clicked into place instantly. 276, the Goblet of Fire's choice and the fourth champion. Her eyes widened. She looked up at Jason, shock in her voice. You set up that barrier not just to stop him from cheating. "You're forcing him against a wall he literally cannot cross," Jason said. "You're forcing him to abandon every trick he's good at and to follow the rules." A hunter's gleam flashed in Jason's eyes as he fixed her with a steady look. "Exactly. When he invokes that rule, he can't hide behind Moody's face and slip a name in secretly," he continued. "He'll have to stand in front of everyone, as Hogwarts' defense against the dark arts professor, and publicly use a power that belongs to a teacher. That's the point. He won't be an assassin in the shadows anymore. He'll have stepped up onto the judgment seat. He'll be using the authority Hogwarts gave him to mount a public challenge to the competition's fairness. At that moment, he and all the conspiracies behind him will be exposed in broad daylight." All the pieces had been set. Jason's web of rules and human motives had quietly spread its net. Now there was nothing left to do but wait for the desperate enemy to walk, step by step, into the trap. At the Halloween feast, the atmosphere in the Great Hall was electric. Pumpkins' lanterns bobbed overhead, ghosts drifted between the tables, but nobody was focused on the food. Tension, excitement, anticipation, these feelings braided into a low, buzzing hum as everyone waited for the final announcement. At the Durmstrang table, students clustered around Victor Krum, who sat like a silent lion, radiating a cold, powerful aura that made him the center of attention. At Beauxbatons, Fleur Delacour drew nearly every male gaze with her Vila beauty, though her blue eyes kept sweeping curiously toward the Gryffindor table. After the past few days, she'd become more interested in Jason Lester than in the contest itself. Back at the Hogwarts table, students loudly debated who would be their champion. Cedric Diggory, handsome and upright, drew the loudest cheers. In that sea of fervor, the corner where Jason, Hermione, Harry, and Ron sat was an isolated island of calm. They ate and murmured quietly, as if the ceremony had nothing to do with them. At the Slytherin table, Draco Malfoy unusually held back, nursing a glass of pumpkin juice and watching the head table with a detached, almost clinical gaze, Karkaroff's clenched fists, Cornelius Fudge's strained smile, the eerie shimmer of Moody's magical eye. All those small details were converted into encrypted data by the tiny alchemical device hidden beneath Jason's cuff and sent to his terminal in real time. When the last dessert vanished, Dumbledore rose and the Great Hall fell silent. "Well, the Goblet of Fire is almost ready," he said in his booming voice. "I think it's time to select the champions." He stepped to the center of the hall beside the ancient cup, its blue-white flames flickering. Under everyone's expectant eyes, the flames surged and spat out the first piece of parchment. "The Durmstrang champion is," Dumbledore read, "Victor Krum." A deafening cheer broke from the Durmstrang table, and Karkaroff slapped Krum on the back with pride. Another parchment followed. "The Beauxbatons champion is Fleur Delacour." Polite, enthusiastic applause greeted Fleur. Finally, the goblet turned to Hogwarts. "The Hogwarts champion," Dumbledore said with a smile, "is Cedric Diggory." Hufflepuff roared. The three champions stepped forward amid thunderous applause. Everything seemed to be following a perfect script. "Excellent," Dumbledore said happily. "Now we have three champions, I hope." His voice cut off. The goblet of fire had glitched. The blue-white flames, which had calmed, suddenly shot up and flamed a dazzling blood red, brighter and wilder than before. With a sound like a soul-wrenching shriek, the red fire spat out a charred piece of parchment. Time seemed to freeze. Dumbledore reached out and caught the smoking scrap. His expression moved from bewilderment to incredulous shock. Then a fierce light, almost like thunder, flared in his blue eyes. He unfolded the parchment slowly. The hall was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. Dumbledore looked up, and in a voice that seemed to still the air, read the name written there. Harry Potter. Absolute, suffocating silence fell. Every cheer, every whisper, every expectation died the moment the name left his mouth. But contrary to what many might have expected, almost no one believed this was Harry's doing. Those who had witnessed the arcane notarization knew what kind of barrier had been set, one grounded in causality that could identify and reject even the Weasley twins' most ingenious alchemical trick. No 14-year-old could have deceived it with a simple spell. This was not merely a student's vanity or mischief. Everyone's eyes turned, as if on cue, to Jason Lester. The implication was immediate and damning. To nearly everyone present, the blood-red flame signaled a blatant political frame, an attempt to publicly disgrace the City of Dawn and the rising influence around Jason Lester. The old world and the new had collided in a single horrifying instant, ignited by that blood-red flame in a way no one had anticipated. 277, noisy accusations and silent chess games. Silence shattered like glass. Cheating. Igor Karkaroff was the first to leap from the high table, his hawkish face a mask of fear and fury, his shrill voice cutting through the charged air of the great hall. He jabbed a trembling finger first at Dumbledore, then at Harry, and finally at Jason. "This is blatant cheating. Dumbledore, Hogwarts has two champions. This completely violates the rules. I demand we withdraw from the competition." Durmstrang withdraws. His cry sounded less like righteous anger and more like hysterical panic. Facing a Dumbledore who had recovered his full authority and an even more formidable presence beside him, Karkaroff wanted nothing more than to flee this scene of trouble. Madame Maxime, the Beauxbatons' headmistress, rose more slowly but no less decisively, her large form radiating authority. "Dumbledore," she intoned, her voice low and commanding, "Hogwarts must explain. The Triwizard Tournament is sacred. The appearance of a fourth champion is an affront to us all and will not stand." In the chaos, Cornelius Fudge at last found the opening he'd been hoping for. He felt, pompously, like a man called by destiny to expose a grave injustice in front of the whole wizarding world. He leapt to his feet, face flushing theatrical outrage as he thundered across the hall. "Dumbledore, Lester, is this your idea of fairness? Is this causal barrier of unknown origin what desecrates our traditions?" He gestured wildly, pointing at Harry and at Jason standing behind Dumbledore. "You have manipulated the competition, thrusting an underage student into the spotlight. Have you no regard for the centuries of honor in Hogwarts? Have you no regard for the reputation of our British wizarding community?" He was trying to present himself as the defender of tradition, the aggrieved hero. But the spectacle he had expected, panic from Dumbledore or Jason, did not unfold. Before either could answer, a cool, impecunious figure rose from the Slytherin table and walked with slow, measured steps to the high table. Lucius Malfoy. He wore a perfectly cut dark gold robe, his platinum hair immaculately arranged. He adjusted his cuffs with deliberate slowness, then lifted his gray eyes to regard Fudge with aristocratic disdain. "Minister," he said, emphasizing each word with a scornful drawl, "before you speak, you should clarify your accusation. Are you, as Minister of Magic, questioning the causal barrier personally implemented by Master Lester, a measure grounded in the world's underlying laws?" He lingered on master and causal. Fudge's face tightened. He remembered then that before him stood not only Lucius Malfoy, but the diplomatic chief of the City of Dawn, the external mouthpiece of a whole polity. Before Fudge could answer, Malfoy's tone shifted, his gray eyes cold and serpentine as they slid over Mad-Eye Moody, gobbling at his goblet, and Barty Crouch, who sat unusually pale at his side. "No," Lucius said, his voice hard as flint. "This is a vicious, shameless conspiracy against Hogwarts and against Master Lester. Someone has exploited an ancient, nearly forgotten loophole in the Triwizard Tournament's charter, and, by means we do not yet fully understand, but which conform to ancient law, forcibly dragged Mr. Harry Potter into this perilous contest." "This is not cheating, Minister," Lucius added, stepping forward so his presence pressed into the hall. "This is a declaration of war." He gave Fudge no opportunity to reply and addressed the assembled guests and professors in a ringing voice. "In my capacity as a Hogwarts governor and as the diplomatic chief of the City of Dawn, I formally propose that the Ministry of Magic convene the highest-level investigative commission, directly supervised by the Wizengamot, to examine this thoroughly. The first subject of this inquiry should be the Department of International Magical Cooperation, the very department charged with safeguarding the Goblet of Fire and drafting and reviewing the competition's rules." Those words landed like hammers. With a few masterfully chosen sentences, Lucius shifted the mantle of suspicion from Harry onto the Ministry and onto Barty Crouch. Fudge's color flickered from red to green to white, his mouth opening as if to speak and finding no words. Karkaroff's shriek stilled as he stared at Lucius with a new, disbelieving horror, as if seeing a former ally in a new light. At the Gryffindor table, Harry Potter remained rigid, fists clenched so tightly his knuckles showed white. There was no triumph in being called a champion, only burning anger and a deep humiliation at being made a pawn. He did not look at Dumbledore or the crowd. He looked only at Jason, who stood not far away. In Harry's gaze there was no confusion, no fear, only absolute trust, and beneath that, a small, pleading hope. Hermione and Ron were on their feet in a heartbeat, moving to flank Harry, forming a protective cordon. Their stance said what words could not: "You are not alone." At the high table, Severus Snape watched with the same cold attention he always wore, his obsidian eyes finally fixed on Moody, who was drinking greedily. Since being taught the breath of spiritual poison by Jason, Snape's senses had sharpened. Now, in the edge of his awareness, Moody gave off a faint but unmistakable fouling, a reek of dark arts, of polyjuice potion, and of another, alien presence. It was a toxic stench that sat deep in the bones, the poison of disguise. A flash of understanding crossed Snape's face. At last he knew who had opened the damned back door, and how. Lucius Malfoy's intervention had ripped open a corner of the plot and splashed the filth back onto the Ministry. His maneuver was brilliant, a lesson in political theater. But his words only poured kerosene on the flames in the Great Hall. Revelation had unsettled everyone further, turning suspicion into outrage. "Conspiracy! This is a conspiracy against us all!" Karkaroff howled, seizing on a new excuse to flee. "Dumbledore, Minister, the tournament must be halted immediately. Until this is cleared up, we will not take part." Fudge's face flickered between indignation and a dawning panic. For a brief, ridiculous instant, he had imagined himself the paragon of justice. Now Lucius had thrown the stain of negligence, or worse, complicity, across him. He waved his fists, trying to reclaim authority. "Malfoy, you libel me. The Ministry is impartial." But his words were drowned by the rising clamor of the hall, leaving him floundering in the storm his rival had stirred. 278. The God King's Judgment Protests. Accusations, panic, rage. 1,000 negative emotions boiled together into a maelstrom that threatened to swallow the Great Hall whole. Just as the chaos reached its peak, the young man who had been unusually quiet all evening stood. The moment he straightened, it felt as if an invisible hand had closed around the heart of the entire hall. Beneath hair turned snow-white from the overuse of his life force, a pair of pure golden eyes swept calmly across the room. The sound of the world seemed to cut out. An indescribable, soul-shuddering pressure rolled through the great hall. It was not magic as they understood it. Magic could be measured, battled, and analyzed. This was will itself, a crushing force rooted in life and spirit. Jason, newly advanced to a third-tier arcanist, had fused his vast mental power with the Grand Sun Codex, whose consuming will burned away everything else. It was divine suppression. Under that pressure, every outburst died. Cornelius Fudge, flushed a moment before, went white. He had inhaled, ready to refute Lucius, but the roar never came. It was choked off as if gripped in his throat. His body froze, cold sweat soaking his robes, mind emptied until only the most primitive fear remained. Igor Karkaroff looked worse, shaken, eyes darting with terror as though he had seen something far worse than Voldemort. His legs buckled, and he stumbled into a chair with a heavy thud that echoed unnaturally in the sudden hush. Even Madame Maxime found her hands clenching without meaning to. Thousands of floating candles above the hall bowed their flames as if under a weight, light paling. The house banners froze mid-wave. In the center of the room, the goblet of fire, its flames a mocking blood red, uttered a living, terrified keening when Jason's gaze met it. The flames collapsed to half their height and shivered back to their usual blue-white, like a child caught doing wrong and being scolded. Silence pressed down harder than ever. Fear spread in a silent, viscous wave, squeezing at each person's soul. Then, Jason spoke. First, Harry Potter did not put his own name in. I vouch for him with my honor. Simple, direct, and absolute. Those words were not an explanation, they were a verdict. Under that oppressive pressure, any doubt sounded foolish, arrogant. Second, his gaze cut to the head table and settled on the rigid figure of Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as Mad-Eye Moody. Crouch's magical eye spun wildly, betraying the horror behind his forced composure. As Mr. Malfoy deduced, someone exploited the rules, Jason said. His voice rolled through the hall like a relentless argument laid bare. A back door I left deliberately, not a trick of magic, but of the rules themselves. According to Hogwarts's oldest regulations, in special circumstances, the professor on duty may represent the school and nominate an additional champion. Someone, posing as the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, used a fictitious, non-existent house name to put Harry's name into the Goblet of Fire, making a contract with it. Jason peeled back the conspiracy to the bone. Dumbledore and Snape's eyes sharpened. Students and guests who had been confused snapped to understanding, a cold, crawling dread rising in them as the plan, so precise, so rotten, revealed itself. Third, a flash of scorn crossed Jason's face as he swept his gaze over Moody, the pale Fudge, the trembling Karkaroff, and the others with something to gain. Since someone wanted to watch a show, since someone chose to challenge us with such underhanded deceit, he paused. The pressure that had filled the hall seemed to coalesce into something like a gathering storm as his voice echoed in their minds. Then I announce, from this moment, the City of Dawn will officially join this Triwizard Tournament as the fourth participant. Harry Potter will no longer solely represent Hogwarts. From this second forward, he will be the champion of the City of Dawn. And I, Jason Lester, will be his mentor and backer, participating throughout. All events, rules, and judging standards for this competition will be subject to my review and approval. We will honor the magical contract of the Goblet of Fire, but Jason's eyes swept the hall with the absolute, sovereign certainty of someone remaking the world in his image. We will play this game our way. Those words were more than thunder. They detonated in the core of everyone's thought, blasting apart reason, custom, and the old assumptions on which they had relied. He wasn't offering a counter-argument. He was overturning the table. He was not merely defending himself. He was transforming a trap laid out to shame and punish into a coronation. Fudge and his waverers were pale and shaking. They had believed their scheme clever enough to mire this dangerous newcomer in politics and public opinion and to strangle him with tradition. Instead, they had awoken something far worse. Not a mere adversary, but a force prepared to consume the corrupt rules of the old order and, from their ashes, build an entirely new one. 279. Financial sponsors and secret investigations. The ripples from Jason's words had not yet faded. The oppressive weight of divine power had lifted, but a bone-deep chill remained in everyone's hearts. The night's events had diverged completely from expectation. The judges' conference room was bright with light, but the atmosphere was sharper than a Siberian gale. Around the long table, the sides were clearly drawn. On one side sat Cornelius Fudge, his face drained of color, Igor Karkaroff, still shaken, Madame Maxime, grave, and Barty Crouch, trying to make himself as small as the wallpaper. On the other side sat a composed Dumbledore, and beside him, the man who had set everything in motion, Jason Lester. I absolutely will not agree. Fudge finally recovered from the pressure and slammed his hand on the table. His voice rose, as if to drown out his own unease. The Triwizard Tournament is a centuries-old tradition. No one can just change the rules. A fourth contestant? Preposterous. Minister Fudge is right, Karkaroff echoed, his voice still trembling. This violates the rules. It's an insult to us all. We demand the competition be run as chartered. Madame Maxime, less agitated but equally serious, added, Mr. Lester, your power is impressive, but rules are the foundation of the wizarding world's survival. Hogwarts already having 2 champions is irregular. Bringing in the City of Dawn will only invite chaos. They tried to frame their objections as a defense of tradition and principle, to take the moral high ground and at least save face. Jason said nothing in reply. He sat still, composed beneath their accusations. Only when they had exhausted themselves did he tilt his chin slightly. Hermione, who had been standing behind him, understood immediately. She stepped forward with measured, professional movements, withdrew several documents bound in premium magical parchment from an alchemical satchel, and laid them on the table before Fudge, Karkaroff, Madame Maxime, and Crouch. Her movements were precise, the calm efficiency of an executive assistant from a prestigious firm. Fudge frowned and snatched up a document. On the cover, a line of elegant golden script read, Cooperative Sponsorship Agreement for the Comprehensive Enhancement of the Triwizard Tournament's Safety, Fairness, and Spectacle. Fudge's eyelids twitched. He opened it and nearly choked at the first clause. The sponsor, City of Dawn, shall provide a total of 100,000 galleons in cash for this Triwizard Tournament as the champion's prize fund. 100,000 galleons. Fudge's eyes widened. The usual prize had been 1,000 galleons. This sum, far greater than any previous reward for a school competition, could fund a small war. Karkaroff saw the figure and, despite his fear, felt greed ripple through him. Madame Maxime read on and felt her brows lift at the next clause. The sponsor shall provide all participating champions, including Cedric, Krum, Fleur, and Harry Potter, with the highest grade Divine Blessing Series personal safety alchemical suits, produced by the City of Dawn Alchemy Workshop at no cost. Each suit includes 3 core functions: an adaptive defensive shield, vital sign monitoring, and emergency spatial teleportation, ensuring the absolute life safety of the champions during competition. Madame Maxime's expression changed. Student safety mattered to her above all. Deaths had occurred in the tournament before. This level of protection was unheard of and likely worth more than the prize money. Barty Crouch scanned the third clause and felt the pupil of his normal eye shrink to a pinprick. The sponsor shall provide all competition venues with a 24/7 Arcane mirror broadcast system at no charge. This system will transmit real-time, multi-angle footage from within the competition venues to the Hogwarts Great Hall, allowing all spectators to safely view every detail of the competition, greatly enhancing spectacle and fairness. One agreement, 3 points. Prize money, safety, spectacle. Each addressed the tournament's pains directly. Each presented an irresistible temptation. It was an open offer, practical benefits no one could easily refuse. Fudge's hands trembled. He wanted to refuse, to denounce the defilement of a sacred event by a pile of galleons. But he also knew if he rejected such an offer, the next day's front page would scream, Minister of Magic rejects 100,000 galleon prize, ignores champion's safety. He would be pilloried across the British wizarding world. This isn't according to the rules, he managed weakly. Oh, what is not according to the rules, Minister? Came a leisurely voice from the doorway. Lucius Malfoy had appeared, leaning with practiced elegance in the frame. If I recall correctly, the Triwizard Charter does not forbid external sponsorship, especially of this magnitude. He crossed to the table, picked up a copy of the agreement, skimmed it, and inclined his head in approval. On behalf of House Malfoy and the pure-blood families who stand with us and trust the City of Dawn, I fully endorse this agreement. He turned to Jason with a cool nod. And to show our respect for Master Lester and our support for the tournament, we will add a further 20,000 galleons to the 100,000. That was the final blow. Fudge was speechless. He understood, belatedly and viscerally, that once money reached a certain scale and was linked to power, tradition, and rules could be torn asunder like tissue paper. He glanced to the last page of the agreement. There, in clear language, was the true condition. Based on the foregoing sponsorship, Mr. Jason Lester, technical representative of the City of Dawn, shall be appointed an honorary judge for this event with a single veto over all matters pertaining to competition items, rules, and judgments. Everything clicked into place for Fudge. Humiliation, reluctance, fear. Dumbledore smiled, took up a quill, and said, "Since no one objects, I think we can sign, for the safety of the children and the future of the tournament." The agreement passed unanimously in a strange, reluctant harmony. With an unassailable contract in hand, Jason Lester was transformed from suspected cheater into the tournament's chief benefactor and the judge with the highest authority. Later, in Jason's private research room at Hogwarts, the atmosphere was the opposite of the conference room's tension. Here there was calm and a confident feeling that everything was under control. Harry, Ron, and Hermione were present, watching with wide eyes as Jason had methodically used leverage and documentation to rout his opponents. Their shock had shifted into admiration. Jason said little. He sat at the main console and tapped the desktop once. A light screen flickered to life, showing Draco Malfoy's slightly nervous but respectful face. "Draco," Jason said with Harry and the others listening. "Master," Draco replied, straightening, his breath quickening. "I have a task for you." Jason's tone was steady. Draco's eyes brightened with excitement and barely contained eagerness. "The first task is dragons." At that announcement, Harry and Ron both paled. To maintain secrecy, the Ministry has covertly transferred 4 adult lactating female dragons from Romania and Wales into the Forbidden Forest by special channels. They are currently contained in runic cages. Jason spoke as calmly as if discussing the weather. "I need you to use every resource and connection your family can provide to infiltrate the Ministry department handling this operation. I want the breed, age, physical condition, attack patterns, and magical resistance of each dragon, and the names, backgrounds, strengths, and psychological weaknesses of the dragon handlers watching them. Everything. I want a report, detailed down to the last particular, sent directly to my terminal within 3 days." Draco was stunned. He had not expected Jason to entrust him with such a sensitive core mission. The shock gave way to exhilaration and a tremor of fear. This was no longer routine schoolwork. It was a real trial, his first formal test from his master. He straightened, chest swelling with pride, face flushed, voice a little unsteady but resolute. "Yes, master," he said. "I swear on the honor of House Malfoy, I will complete the task." Jason's command fell on Draco Malfoy like a brand, instantly clearing away every stray thought. Hesitation and bewilderment vanished without a trace, leaving only a fierce fighting spirit. Quietly, a 2-pronged intelligence campaign unfolded, one front inside Hogwarts, the other beyond its walls. On the surface, everything followed the path Jason had already mapped out. Barty Crouch Jr., still playing Mad-Eye Moody, performed his role to perfection. He staged a casual meeting with Hagrid in the corridor as the gamekeeper walked past on his way to feed the hippogriffs at the edge of the Forbidden Forest. His magical eye spun wildly, scanning the area with exaggerated vigilance. Then, in a tone of conspiratorial concern, he let slip a large secret to Hagrid. "Listen, Hagrid," he said. "They've brought in some big creatures, moved them into the Forbidden Forest. I'm worried about Harry. The boy doesn't know, and that's not right. You should find an excuse to take him to see them." Hagrid swallowed the bait immediately. His chest swelled at the idea, and he promised eagerly to tell Harry the truth. Barty watched Hagrid's broad back disappear down the corridor, a self-satisfied, cold smirk on his face. He fancied himself the player moving pieces on a chessboard. Unbeknownst to him, an alchemical probe, smaller than a mosquito, perched on the gargoyle above his head and streamed his smug expression back in real time to Jason's control room. Every move, every self-congratulatory plan was already on the recording. On a different, far more efficient front, an Arcane-style intelligence operation was taking shape under Draco Malfoy's command. He was no longer just the boy who shadowed Harry and spat petty taunts. The authority Jason had given him ignited the cunning and courage of a Malfoy heir. In the Slytherin common room, as a prefect, Draco summoned students whose parents held positions in the Ministry of Magic. He spoke from an armchair by the fire with the poise of someone used to being obeyed. My father, representing the City of Dawn, has just added a large sponsorship to the Triwizard Tournament, he announced. My lord, Mr. Lester, is particularly concerned about the safety of the competition. I need to know whether the Ministry, especially the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, has had any unusual large-scale transport records lately. This concerns not only our lives, but the honor of Slytherin. He did not mention dragons. He framed it as a matter of safety and house pride. The pure-blood students who usually hung on his words straightened immediately, beating chests and promising to write home at once to get to the bottom of it. Later, in his dormitory, Draco activated a palm-sized encrypted communication disc engraved with runes. Light flickered, and Lucius Malfoy's face appeared above the hollow. "Father," Draco said, steady and precise. "My lord requires a list. The Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, every transport record for highly dangerous creatures linked to Romania and Wales in the past month, transport methods, routes, and handover personnel. Use your highest authority and send it to my terminal within 2 hours." He issued the order like a superior to a subordinate. Lucius's face showed no resentment, only pride and relief, and he bowed deeply. "As you command, young Master Draco." When the connection cut, Draco pulled a silver briefcase from under his bed. Inside, several metal dragonflies lay in neat rows. He had crafted them during the summer, combining his newly acquired arcane knowledge with the Malfoy's alchemical skill. Each housed a miniature wind elemental crystal for silent flight. Runes of environmental mimicry on their shells let them evade most magical detection around the castle. "Go," he murmured to them. "Bring me the breath of those big creatures." The metal dragonflies shuddered to life, their wings turning into transparent shadows as they slipped through the window and disappeared into the darkness of the forbidden forest. 3 days later, in Jason's laboratory, Draco stood before the control panel. He looked tired, but his eyes shone with electric excitement. A massive holographic screen displayed everything he'd gathered over the past 72 hours, a report so detailed it bordered on exhaustive. The first section cataloged the 4 dragons. Target 1, Hungarian Horntail, adult female, approximately 12 years old, extremely volatile temperament, currently in a pre-laying frenzy. Breath, conical flame jet, instantaneous temperature up to 2,000 degrees Celsius. Physical defense extremely high, abdominal scales are the weakest point. Magic resistance analysis, clear stress response to high-frequency sonic spells, recommend infrasonic oscillation for interference. Target 2, Chinese Fireball Dragon, adult female. Target 3, Swedish Short Snout. Target 4, Common Welsh Green. Type, health, reproductive cycle, even the number of eggs each had laid were listed with clinical precision. The second section mapped the Dragon Rider's shifts and deployments. Guard team consists of 12 people, led by Charlie Weasley. They rotate in 3 shifts of 4. Shift changes occur daily at 6 a.m., 2 p.m., and 10 p.m., with an approximate 3-minute defensive gap during each change. The third section, what Jason valued most, was the elemental and magical fluctuation analysis based on the dragon breath samples. 4 spectral graphs, side by side, spoke in colors and numbers. The Hungarian Horntail's flame shows the purest fire element but the least stability. It's highly susceptible to external ice or water elemental interference, which can induce a magical annihilation reaction and temporarily interrupt its spray. Jason leafed through the pages with a calm face, then turned to Draco, who held his breath in nervous anticipation. "Well done, Draco," Jason said plainly, the highest praise coming in the plainest tone. "You have proven your worth and the loyalty of House Malfoy." A surge of elation rushed through Draco. "From today onward," Jason continued, "you are the probationary director of the City of Dawn's Intelligence Department. You will be responsible for all intelligence gathering and analysis targeting the old world." My lord," Draco blurted, then dropped to one knee, forcing his voice steady. "I will never fail your trust." Far away in the floating City of Dawn, inside a vast factory churning with steampunk and arcane machinery, furnaces roared and alchemical mixtures hissed. This was the Weasley Alchemy Factory. Fred and George, wearing oil-stained overalls, supervised a legion of alchemical golems when a huge holographic screen unfolded above the factory floor. Draco's impeccably detailed report and 3D models of the 4 dragons filled the air. Fred, George, Jason's voice intoned from the projection, carrying command. Boss, the twins shouted, dropping their tools and running to the screen. This is your intelligence, Jason said. Create a single-person combat plan for Harry Potter. I don't want anything outdated or clumsy like a flying broom, he added. I want it to display the superiority of the arcane, ultra-high mobility, powerful control, and, he paused, a hint of mischief in his voice, it must be magnificent, breathtaking. I want everyone in the world to bury the name City of Dawn in their bones because of this day. Fred and George glanced at each other, then at the lifelike, silently roaring dragon models. The light in their eyes burned hotter than the alchemical furnaces behind them. This task was no longer merely a trial for Harry Potter. It was a meticulously planned debut, a spectacle to demonstrate the unparalleled power and aesthetics of arcane civilization to a decaying magical world. Leave it to us, boss, they shouted in unison, voices brimming with feverish confidence. We'll make sure he grabs every eye in the world.